Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Gish Gallop Girl, and I hope as I write this, that it has not been too long since we were all together, but to put a timestamp on this episode, just yesterday, when I was writing this, which is very far back, Tristan Tate and his brother Andrew Tate were arrested in Florida with the threat looming over them that they may be sent to the UK to face justice for their many sexual and money crimes. Andrew Tate was, as always, practicing his own kind of masculinity, wearing an outfit straight from the closet of Blanche Dubois and the Golden Girls. Better people than me pointed that out and made memes about it, and it is worth your time to see. I won't comment further on his dressing choices, since I myself have adopted the middle-aged schlub chic, but such is life. Anyway, I'm here tonight with...
Matthew Anderson.
There we go, see, that's right. And tonight we are diving back into the morass that is the Candace Owens series, A Shot in the Dark. And this is our breakdown, review, and fact check on episode 19 from that series, focused on the Prevnar vaccine. If you don't know what that is, you might know what it is by the end. Or not. I'm not responsible for your levels of comprehension.
Also, not that anybody needs it if they're watching this deep into it, but Thomas Anderson.
What about?
You.
Oh, yeah, me. Didn't I say that at the top? I might not have.
Might.
I don't know.
Well.
Who cares? Anyway. Yeah, so I'm just here to call out bullshit while my son listens and gets to be the first among you to say, what the fucking fuck? Or at least he gets to be the first person in the audience to think it. And now, here we go with the first clip.
All right, guys, it's time for another episode of A Shot in the Dark. This week, we're going to very briefly go over the Prevnar vaccine, which was actually discontinued once certain type, the Prevnar 13 vaccine. Now there's a Prevnar 20 vaccine. We'll get into this, but I would at first like to talk about a couple of big pharma stories that are in the media today that I just found to be positively astounding. So first, I just want to remind you of that funny little meme that we showed you a couple of episodes back. Here it is again. It's a doctor sitting down with his patients. The doctor says, "Your disease is caused by your lifestyle." The patient says, "So should I change my lifestyle?" And the doctor says, "Not at all. Here's a pill." And the reason why that meme is so great, obviously, is because we see so much of that being reflected in our society, where obviously there are things that people can do to make themselves healthy outside of taking a pill or taking an injection. But Big Pharma seems hell-bent on keeping every single person tethered to having to go back to the doctor's office, constantly having to take pills. It is a question of whether or not this is making us better anymore or definitely making us sicker, and I would obviously argue the latter.
Any joke you have to explain wasn't that funny to begin with. It wasn't funny the first time, and it stays unfunny now. I'm not going to say that doctors don't do this. Many certainly do, but that's hardly a matter to joke about, even if you're into gallows humor. I do love the idea that Candace explains the unfunny meme and says that it's funny because, and then gets all serious. Like, I know that part of the narcissistic condition is not actually understanding humor or finding humor in cruelty, as she has done time and again, but I have to wonder sometimes how the pay pigs took this kind of thing. I'll probably never know, and I'm okay with that. And now Candace is going to talk about a subject poorly, but it's not the one everyone came here for, but just give it a listen.
This news story absolutely blew my mind, you guys. The American Academy of Pediatrics is now recommending Ozempic for overweight kids. Think about that meme. You have an overweight kid, I don't know, I guess in a normal society, a doctor would say he needs to play outside. He needs to get outside. He obviously needs to control his diet and how many calories he's intaking per day. Absolutely not anymore, because now they are excited that the FDA has now approved Wegovy and Ozempic, semaglutide obviously, for overweight kids, teens 12 and up, who have a BMI index that is above the 95th percentile for their age and sex. Now again, if you have a teenager that is 12 years old and they have a BMI index that is above the 95th percentile, that should signal to you that there is a lifestyle change that needs to take place, not them having to take Ozempic, something that I have been beating the drum against on my podcast. Now, again, no judgment zone, especially if you're an adult. People do and take the risks that they want to take when they are an adult. I say this even whether it's you want to get filler, you want to get Botox, you want to take Ozempic, knowing that it comes with a tremendous amount of risks. I can take no issue with that because you're an adult and you have to live your life the way that you want to live it. But when it comes to children, when it comes to vaccines, when it comes to decisions that are being made for children that can impact the rest of their lives, it obviously creates, for me, it just turns me into an enemy of the system because they don't understand the decisions that are being made for them. They can't possibly understand the potential consequences.
So, before she continues, on the video version of this, Candace showed an article from the diabetes medical information site, DiaTribe, from January of 2023. The headline was the only thing she showed to viewers, and it is, American Academy of Pediatrics releases first guideline to treat childhood obesity. Then she said all of that shit about needing real medicine and how just throwing kids a pill isn't the right way, and she clearly did not read the article at all. But I'm going to do so right now. American Academy of Pediatrics releases first guideline to treat childhood obesity. From the article at the top. Link in the link stack, of course. Obesity affects about 1 in 5 children in the United States and can lead to many health issues down the road, including type 2 diabetes. For the first time, the AAP released guidance for evaluating and treating children with obesity. The American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, has taken a significant step forward in recognizing childhood obesity as a disease that requires evaluation and treatment. The new guideline recommends lifestyle intervention as a core component of childhood obesity treatment, along with considering anti-obesity medications and bariatric surgery when specific conditions are met. Obesity is one of the most common chronic diseases facing children and adolescents in the U.S. ages 2 to 19 years, affecting about 14.7 million, or 1 in 5 children. That's 20%. Childhood obesity can lead to serious health issues such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, asthma, and joint problems. Obesity also significantly increases one's risk for type 2 diabetes. Similar to diabetes, childhood obesity is more common among Hispanic children, 26.2%, and non-Hispanic black children, 24.8%, than non-Hispanic white children at 16.6%. Obesity prevalence is also higher among children in the lowest income groups, 18.9%, compared to children in the highest income group at 10.9%. Inequities cause these health disparities, which is why attention to social determinants of health is crucial to obesity treatment. And they have a link there. Read more about how race affects diabetes here. For lifestyle intervention, according to the AAP guideline, foundational care should include, quote, intensive health behavior and lifestyle treatment, end quote, or IHBLT, for children aged 6 years and older. The guideline further suggests that this treatment is most effective when it is face-to-face and engages the whole family. Additionally, 26 hours of nutrition, physical activity, and behavior change support should be provided over 3 to 12 months. Regardless of the child's age, the greater number of contact hours with the healthcare team, the greater the treatment effect. Depending on the degree of obesity in the child, the AAP guideline further recommends integrating anti-obesity medications such as metformin and GLP-1 receptor agonists, and potentially bariatric surgery with IHBLT to treat the condition. These medications have been shown to be safe and effective treatment options for children 12 years and older, especially when combined with lifestyle treatment. Just this year, the FDA also approved Wegovy, semaglutide, as a weight loss treatment for adolescents above age 12 years, increasing options for teens struggling with unhealthy weight. Bariatric surgery should also be considered in children ages 13 years and older with severe obesity, according to the new AAP guidance. Although a more drastic approach, bariatric surgery can be particularly successful in maintaining a lower and healthier BMI. Anti-obesity medications and bariatric surgery are approaches that are more often used in adult populations, but evidence suggests that they are safe and effective for some children as well. Quote, while these guidelines are meant to help pediatricians evaluate and treat childhood obesity, said Dr. Francine Kaufman, pediatric endocrinologist at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, quote, "It is important for parents, guardians, and children themselves to understand the role lifestyle programs have in improving health and when it might be appropriate to consider medications and bariatric surgery to address more severe obesity and its complications." Obesity is defined as body mass index, BMI, at or above the 95th percentile for children and teens of the same age and sex. You can learn more about BMI here, link provided. If you have concerns about your child's weight, be sure to discuss these issues with your pediatrician. Be sure you know their BMI, which you can calculate here, link provided. The AAP guideline emphasizes a whole child approach that recognizes that several factors can affect one's risk and affect treatment, including individual and family risk factors as well as systemic inequities that may contribute to obesity and block treatment success. Because obesity is such a complex disease, the guideline authors consider various factors that can influence a child's living condition, such as proximity to recreation areas or green spaces, or food insecurity, which is when someone does not have consistent access to nutritious foods. Relying on nutrient inadequate foods can lead to type 2 diabetes and obesity. Pediatricians need to be aware of these risk factors to provide care and guidance to their patients. Read more about the social determinants of health here, link provided. If you are someone who experiences food insecurity, here are a few resources that can help. SNAP website, which can help determine your eligibility for SNAP benefits. Benefits.gov, eligibility checker, which can help you access other government benefits related to food and health care. The National School Lunch Program, which provides nutritional low-cost or free lunches to children every school day. FindHelp.org, a database that can help you find free or low-cost food and other essential services in your area. Childhood obesity increases the likelihood that unhealthy weight will continue into adulthood, which is why the AAP recommends an approach that continues through childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood. This approach can start as early as pre-pregnancy, with doctors making sure that any pregnant person achieves a healthy weight before getting pregnant and maintains a healthy weight during pregnancy, as maternal weight often influences an infant's birth weight. The guideline also recommends several policy changes that are needed to efficiently combat rising levels of childhood obesity and to reach the broader population in an accessible manner. These policies include limiting the marketing of unhealthy foods and investigating the impact that under-resourced communities and food insecurity have on obesity treatment. Quote, "This is a big step forward in realizing the gravity of childhood obesity," Kaufman said. Quote, "It's putting it in a disease category where it deserves to be placed. Understanding the potential impact that we can make by offering lifestyle programs and considering pharmacotherapy and bariatric surgery is important to help improve the health of the next generation of adults." That's it. Your thoughts?
Doesn't sound like they were suggesting any Ozempic in there.
No.
And also, that's a lot. I mean, I figured there were a decent amount of resources, but that's a lot more resources than I thought would be involved in all of that.
Yeah.
Well, so what do they mean by 95th percentile?
Oh, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, but as I understand it, the 95th percentile is like the percent of the population that is obese.
Okay.
Like you want to have as little of that as possible. So, yeah. And we are like the average, if you're taking it as like the average kid is, the average 1 in 5 kids is in what they consider an obesity category, then that's 20%, which is 80% is not, and that's not good for society going forward.
No.
You want as few people with those conditions, because there are people that really can't help that, glandular issues, what have you. But for the ones that it can be prevented in, it's like vaccines. Mm-hmm. If there are people that can never take a vaccine, just due to usually allergies.
Yeah. It's better if the ones that can do.
Yeah. Someone had brought up to me earlier today, in fact, an article about how the Somali population here in Minnesota, and most of them are in the Twin Cities, but how the Somali population, only about 25% of their minors, people under 18, 19 years old, only about 25% of them, or 24% it was, are actually vaccinated against measles.
Oh.
But we're not seeing a whole bunch of measles cases from them. And I pointed this out to them. We're not seeing a whole bunch of measles cases from that community because the other communities around them
Are vaccinated.
are highly vaccinated.
Yeah.
So, it's not getting in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the bark on a tree. If you've got something persistent enough, like a borer beetle or something like that, it'll get in. But for most things, the bark on a tree keeps, the actual flesh wood of the tree from being, fucked with. So, it's why we have to have high vaccination rates. I would prefer the Somalis be better vaccinated.
Yeah.
But, it's also tough right now for them to get out because even though Operation Metro Surge officially ended, ICE is still out there picking people up.
Yeah.
And they obviously don't feel safe going to one of their own community health clinics, nor do their community health people feel safe going to them.
No, especially not when you have other states reporting that, ICE is sitting outside of the medical facilities and the pediatric facilities.
Yeah, it's all, their lives are already dicey enough. They're not going to complicate it right now with what they see as an unnecessary risk.
Yeah.
So it's still a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a problem that needs to be managed in a different way, and it's just not going to happen right now. Mm-hmm. But it's for their own benefit. Most Minnesotans and most other groups are highly vaccinated.
Yeah.
So measles has to have a vector in. Mm-hmm. And its only vector in is going to be among unvaccinated people that travel. Most of the Somalis that come here don't tend to travel very far outside of the state because they don't want to run into the rednecks that think they're an issue.
Yeah.
At worst, they may get on a plane and go somewhere, but most of these are working people that can't afford to take a flight anywhere right now. It's a big catch situation where, they don't really want to leave. And I get that. They're kind of safe here, but, I think they're safer because the rest of us are vaccinated. Mm-hmm. They absolutely should be, but you work with what you have.
Yeah.
But, so the article itself there obviously talked about exercise, proper nutrition, hygiene, and doing everything possible, and reserved GLP-1 and bariatric surgery recommendations for only the most extreme cases. But Candace never mentioned the bariatric surgery in her little rant down. Mm-mm. So, I really do not think that she read the article. I can say with some certainty based on this next clip.
So according to a press release excited about semaglutide hitting the market for children, the press release reads, obesity rates in adolescents aged 12 through 19 have gone up significantly over the past 5 years, with researchers predicting even greater increases in the near future. In a study recently published by the American Diabetes Association, researchers predict a staggering increase in the number of people diagnosed with diabetes under the age of 12. Models suggest a nearly 700% increase in youth with type 2 diabetes. Obesity during childhood and adolescence not only increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, but also rapidly accelerates the progression of diabetes-related complications, such as chronic kidney disease and various heart conditions. This new research should serve as a wake-up call for us, said Dr. Deborah Houry, the acting deputy director of the CDC, in a recent press release. It's vital that we focus our efforts to ensure all Americans, especially our young people, are the healthiest that they can be. And I guess in an effort to make them as healthy as they can be, they are recommending that they inject themselves with semaglutide, which obviously has become a fad amongst a lot of people who are desperate to lose weight. Many of them who don't even need to lose weight. It's become, honestly, a housewife trend at a certain point, people that just want to be deathly skinny and obviously do not need these drugs.
Yeah, so, first off, she was not reading from a press release.
No.
Not even close. She was reading from a different story on the DiaTribe site. And, of course, her reading comprehension was both way off and probably wasn't used in any capacity. She quoted a short section of the short article, as she does, but here is the entire thing. Pay attention, kids. You might learn something. FDA approves weight loss drug Wegovy for teens. The FDA recently approved Wegovy, semaglutide, a GLP-1 receptor agonist, as a weight loss treatment for teens aged 12 and up. Wegovy is now the first once-weekly weight loss drug approved for adolescents. A significant milestone to bring in the new year. The FDA approved Wegovy, semaglutide, on December 23, 2022, for teens ages 12 and up who have a BMI at or above the 95th percentile for their age and sex. The drug was originally approved for adults with obesity in June 2021. Since then, Wegovy has become one of the most popular prescription weight loss drugs, leading to a supply shortage towards the end of 2022. On January 3rd, Novo Nordisk announced that it had worked through these issues and plans to increase production in 2023. Semaglutide, which is also available under the brand name Ozempic and Rybelsus, is a GLP-1 receptor agonist that has been shown to help people with type 2 diabetes lose weight, lower glucose levels, and protect against diabetes-related heart complications. Obesity rates in adolescents ages 12 to 19 have gone up significantly over the past 5 years, with researchers predicting even greater increases in the near future. In a study recently published by the American Diabetes Association, researchers predict a staggering increase in the number of people diagnosed with diabetes under age 20. Computer models suggest a nearly 700% increase in youth with type 2 diabetes. Obesity during childhood and adolescence not only increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, but also rapidly accelerates the progression of diabetes-related complications such as chronic kidney disease and various heart conditions. Quote, the new research should serve as a wake-up call for all of us, end quote, said Dr. Deborah Howery, acting deputy director of the CDC, in recent press release. Quote, it's vital that we focus our efforts to ensure all Americans, especially our young people, are the healthiest they can be, end quote. The new indication for Wegovy follows results from the STEP Teens clinical trial, a phase 3 study that included 201 teens ages 12 to 17, all but one of whom had a BMI at or above the 95th percentile for their age and sex. By the end of the 68-week trial, participants taking Wegovy saw an average decrease of 16.1 percentage points in their BMI percentile compared with the placebo group, whose average BMI percentile increased by 0.6 percentage points. Of those who received Wegovy, 73% lost at least 5% of their starting body weight by the end of the study. Wegovy is the first once-weekly GLP-1 receptor agonist approved as a weight loss medication for people under the age of 18. Other GLP-1 receptor agonists, including Victoza, liraglutide, and Bydureon Besis exenatide, are available as once-daily injections for adolescents who have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Saxenda, which is liraglutide 3 mg, a once-daily injection, is also FDA approved as a weight loss treatment for teens with or without type 2 diabetes. Kisimia, a once-daily oral medication that is not a GLP-1 receptor agonist, is also indicated as an obesity treatment for adolescents aged 12 to 17. Quote, now more than ever we need new options to support teens, end quote, said Erin S. Kelly, co-director of the Center for Pediatric Obesity Medicine at the University of Minnesota. Hey, local. In a press release from Novo Nordisk, quote, the FDA approval offers an additional tool to address this serious chronic progressive disease. In addition to the usual safety information for this class of medications, the product label suggests discontinuing Wegovy before attempting pregnancy for both females and males, and stopping if an unplanned pregnancy occurs. For more about Wegovy, type 2 diabetes, and obesity in childhood and adolescence, and there it has a few links at the bottom of the article for anyone interested in learning more. So, once again, she did not read the whole fucking article.
No.
You know?
I mean, that's a lot of words you're expecting her to understand.
Yeah. Here's what's funny, though. I don't know if anybody caught it. They talked about how, as recently as 2022, and then in 2023, Novo Nordisk said they would, get rid of their supply chain failures.
Mm-hmm.
The episode that we are reviewing right now came out in 2024. She had to go back in time to get this fucking material.
And didn't even quote it correctly nor properly read it.
Or have any kind of a follow-up. So, here's the next clip.
Now, to be clear, a 700% increase in youth with type 2 diabetes represents an epidemic. Where is this epidemic coming from? Well, other than obviously lifestyle changes, America as a country has become remarkably more sedentary. Kids are playing video games, where I was outside playing kickball when I was a child. We didn't have social media when I was a child. We moved our bodies more. You go a generation before that, 2 generations before that, talking about my grandparents, and people were working with their hands. Workout was actually going to work. And obviously now that there is so much technology, we are excused from having to move our bodies in the same capacity that they had to move their bodies just a few short generations ago. But there is also a component of this that is coming directly from what they are putting in our food, our body's inability to break down the stuff that they are putting in our food.
Okay, so before she goes on and ruins this, I want to say that I agree with this, and this is the rare sensible take from Candace Owens.
Mm-hmm.
People do, in general, move less, possibly much less these days on average. Studies and reports bear that out. But it also depends on where you live. Here in the Twin Cities and the suburbs, I am surrounded by people, much more fit on average than I saw back in Florida. But if you look up the average data for Minnesota, it seems generally unfit and in line with the general population in America. So with that in mind, given how obsessed our culture seems to be on general health and wellness in the States, even though we lead the world in heart disease brought on by lifestyle and diet, we have a huge population, and a lot of us are supporting massive diet, workout, and wellness industries. So I would take it, or rather, I would like it if the paper cited here had produced better data supporting that claim of obesity rising by 700% in coming years. Like, what scale is that? How many people? And so on. But again, I don't entirely disagree with her on this stuff. People should be as active as possible, eat better, and make an effort whenever possible to keep themselves healthy. Not everyone is in complete control of their circumstances, but those that are able to affect change or keep themselves healthy should absolutely do so. So this is the rare good job, Candace, except that we're going to follow it with another clip.
It is remarkable, because I am married to a person that is British, to go overseas, to spend time in Europe, and to realize that they are not allowed to put the same chemicals that we are allowed to put in our food here in America overseas. You taste that difference as soon as you land. As soon as if you eat a piece of fruit, it tastes different when you are in Europe, especially when you're in Switzerland. There are so many chemicals that are in our food today. And of course, there is the rise of things that are not even food, right? When we are talking about health in general, we have now moved into a time in society where we are eating junk food, where people are making food in a microwave. Incomprehensible if you talk to your grandparents, the concept of people living in dorms, making meals in a microwave, people at home making meals in a microwave. That's actually one thing that I stopped doing last year. I don't use a microwave anymore, and it's been life-changing. I don't know why I ever did use a microwave. It's just because my parents used the microwave. It was just something that I guess I learned in my household, and when I actually considered the concept of making food in that little box, I thought, this obviously can't be healthy. Common sense, this can't be healthy. It takes just a little more time to warm it up on the stove, and it tastes a whole lot better. So obviously there are some major lifestyle changes that have happened. There are chemicals that are now in our food, and it is impacting children. But rather than addressing any of that, well, who stands to benefit from that? Who stands to benefit from the entire concept of frozen food, from the ingredients that they are putting in to make it even look or taste like food? Big Pharma. Big Pharma is exactly who you can blame for all the stuff that is impossible for our body's natural system to break down, that is leading to the sudden increase that we are seeing in childhood obesity and in adult obesity.
It's not Big Pharma, Candace. Mostly because, as we have discussed many times on this program, Big Pharma is a catch-all term because she doesn't want to be sued by any one company. But further on, pharmaceutical companies are not responsible for food policy. The government is, and many of our representatives are in the pockets of lobbyists that represent companies, trade organizations, and anything that can stand to make a buck on less regulations. A recent thing that has happened during this phase of the worst timeline is that a major produce supplier, Taylor Farms, might be the cause of a massive cyclospora outbreak affecting thousands of people across the country in multiple states. 10,000 at last count, I heard.
10,000?
10,000 people.
Oof.
It might be up to 15,000 by now. But, yeah. Big Pharma is not profiting off of that because there is no drug remedy for an infection of this parasite. Companies that make things that help people cope might be marginally better, especially if anyone is stocking up on Imodium and Gatorade and such, just in case they catch a case and still must work to survive. But Big Pharma is not benefiting from it. No one is benefiting from this issue. As far as better produce in other countries, sure.
Also, having gone from this elevation to Colorado elevation, from originally Florida elevation, I can tell you food tastes different based off of elevations, and if you're going to fucking Switzerland,
Yeah.
Okay. If you're going to Switzerland,
Yeah.
your food's gonna fucking taste different.
Yeah, it's going to taste a little different, but, you know, as I said, as far as better produce in other countries, sure. I've had corn fresh off the stalk in Washington State, fresh harvested Yukon Gold potatoes there as well, fresh tomatoes and peppers from my own gardens, and so on. Fresher is always better. And if something tastes not quite fresh at the produce section in your grocery store, there is a solid chance that it was shipped from far away and plucked not quite ripe, then hit with chemicals on the journey to the food shelf. Because we have very lax regulations in America. Simple as. So, if Candace wants better produce, seasonally available, like the average European has, then she is also therefore pushing for tighter regulations on food, same with ingredients and food and drinks being a cocktail of chemicals. And maybe, if employers were forced to pay better and we had better unions across the board, even for office workers and tech workers and the like, maybe people would cook at home more often and not rely on microwave meals to get through life. She comes right up to the edge of socialism and then backs the hell off the gas. You want that shit to be more like Europe? I know that I do. The EU is not perfect, but I don't see anyone like Trump pissing all over their rights over there and getting away with it.
Yeah.
Fucking absurd. Moving on.
The number is something close to 300,000 deaths per a year that are attributable to obesity in this country and the various diseases that come from being clinically obese. And yet, right now in society, we have a movement that is encouraging fat, right? It is called the fat acceptance movement. And I have pretty much promised you guys throughout this entire series that I would abstain from getting political, and I hope that you don't view this as something that is political.
What?
Right.
Huh?
Yeah.
Sorry, that one hit me out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here going, okay, yeah, fat acceptance movement, whatever. I've seen plenty of, body positivity things.
Yeah.
And then just now I know that I said I wouldn't get political.
She did say that.
Did she?
She did say that a couple of times.
Okay.
It has not borne fruit.
No.
But she did say that.
It's...
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay, Candace, so here we go. Before she gets too far into this one, I wanted to share with you all that I looked up and found an NIH report about the number she just cited. The scale on the number is actually 280,000 to 325,000 deaths each year in the USA are attributed to obesity factors. However, going further than the surface data yields some surprising facts about this. So she is correct on the assumed number, but she is incorrect overall in her take on the subject. From the link in the link stack about this, here is the paper on trends and patterns in obesity-related deaths in the U.S. from 2010 to 2020. A comprehensive analysis using Centers for Disease Control and Prevention wide-ranging online data for epidemiologic research. From the abstract at the top, obesity is a significant public health issue in the United States, contributing to a range of chronic conditions and premature mortality. This study analyzes patterns in obesity-related deaths from 2010 to 2020 using the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention wide-ranging online data for epidemiologic research, abbreviated as CDC Wonder. This database, a database to identify trends and demographic disparities. A retrospective analysis was conducted using the CDC Wonder database, focusing on mortality data associated with specific international classification of diseases, 10th revision, ICD-10, codes for obesity, E66.0, .1, .2, .8, and .9. Data were extracted for the period from January 1st, 2010 to December 31st, 2020. Mortality rates per 100,000 population were calculated and analyzed across different demographic groups, including age, gender, and race ethnicity. The analysis revealed an overall increase in obesity-related mortality rates, rising from 1.8 per 100,000 in 2010 to 3.1 per 100,000 in 2020. Age-specific mortality rates showed a significant increase in older age groups, with the highest rates observed in individuals aged 55 to 64 years, 6.4 deaths per 100,000, and 65 to 74 years at 7.2 deaths per 100,000. Gender disparities were evident, with higher mortality rates in males, 3.4 per 100,000, compared to females, 2.8 per 100,000. By the end of the study period, racial disparities were also noted, with Black or African American individuals experiencing the highest mortality rates, 4.3 per 100,000. The study highlights a concerning upward trend in obesity-related mortality in the United States over the past decade, with notable disparities based on age, gender, and race. These findings underscore the need for targeted public health interventions and policies aimed at reducing obesity prevalence and its associated mortality. Further research should explore the underlying... Okay, I lost my place there.
Underlying.
Yeah, that's not helping.
Oh.
Study highlights the consumer. Its findings underscore the need for targeted public health interventions and politics aimed at reducing obesity prevalence and its associated mortality. Further research should explore the underlying causes and contributing factors to these trends to develop effective strategies for obesity management and prevention. Among the notable strengths of this study include the observation that it leveraged a comprehensive and decade-long countrywide database with detailed and up-to-date ICD-10 codes and demographic data to offer in-depth insights into obesity-related disparities and mortality trends in the United States. Nevertheless, the findings of this study have been limited by its increased focus on the United States data, depending only on mortality records, devoid of consideration of morbidity alongside the lack of detailed data on lifestyle factors and comorbid conditions. End of the quote from the study. So there is a lot more there getting down into the numbers. That was just the bit before the introduction. Anyone interested can read the rest, but the abstract is a nice Cliff's Note. So yes, obesity is an issue in the U.S., and I don't want to gloss over it, but it seems from the raw numbers to be a larger issue with older adults, those considered seniors and older. The very same people that Candace considers to have been from basically a better generation of Americans that moved more often.
Mm-hmm. That didn't use microwave.
Yeah.
I tell you, there's more old folks at the supermarket buying microwavable meals than there are younger folks.
I can tell you this, as someone that shops for people on a regular basis, I have several senior citizens that are preferred members of mine, meaning I'm their preferred shopper. When they place orders, I'm the one who is most likely to get it first. At least I get the offer first.
Yeah.
And most of the time I take those orders if I'm available to, because they're usually super nice folks. They're quick to respond to any issues that come up, and they're generally pleasant to shop for. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you a lot of them, They buy microwave meals. And not only that, they buy the same microwave meals.
Yeah.
And if the store doesn't have them, they don't want to touch anything else.
Mm-hmm.
They want their fucking lean cuisine roast turkey medallions. You know? That's one person I got. They always want their lean cuisine roast turkey medallions, and they always order 5 of them. Like one for each day to get them through the week. If they don't have any, they ask me to find out when they might be available so that they can place another order later in the week.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. You know, I do what I can.
When I worked for the one grocery store, we had Uber drivers who would come in and they'd hit the frozen section and then they'd look at anybody in the grocery department and just go, when are you getting this in? You don't have any on the shelf. You're not going to have any in the back. When are you going to get it in? When's the next shipment?
Right.
Tuesday? Okay, I'll let my customer know.
Yeah. That's the best you can do sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are times where I'll just make it up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I know that, like, most of the stores I shop in get trucks every day.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and if the item is a hot enough item, they're going to have it on hand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's generally a good guess that 48 hours they'll be restocked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I know that most of these stores do not have much in the way of, like, a cold back room.
Yeah.
They don't. Like, America retailers went over to on-hand inventory only several years ago, decades back, and they've never quite gotten over the drug of it.
Yeah.
So,
never mind, it makes life so much more difficult for the employee.
yeah. You know, but, yeah, so sedentary, seated lifestyles do contribute to obesity as well as diet, and the study goes into that in greater detail, as well as racial and gender breakdowns. But the point is, the largest number of these cases are among retirees, not children. The largest number of obesity-related deaths are also among the older sets of persons. Now, one of the more salient points here is that a lot of the dead had obesity-related issues through much of the end of their lives. Heart problems, breathing issues, diabetes, inflammation, and so on. Death is just the final bit. Candace is, of course, coming at this all wrong. For many people, as I noted earlier, hold on, I'm going to let Kitty out of the room. She's probably going to go do stuff. There we go. Okay. So, as I was saying, for many people, as I noted earlier, health issues from having to overwork just to survive in the modern era are unfortunately common. A person is going to reach levels of obesity faster if they are commuting 1 to 4 hours per day, having to put in a work week with almost no days off, working, period, whether at a desk or on their feet, but putting in time with stress. Stress is a known factor that makes losing weight harder for people, combined with having to cope by utilizing snacks, drinks, and so on, just adds to the issue. So what we have is a population heading for a cliff because they aren't being paid enough and are having to overwork just to survive. People in those situations are, of course, going to be drawn toward easy snacks, microwave meals, fast food places, you get it. Again, we have Candace identifying a problem, but because she married wealth, she doesn't have these issues and doesn't want to consider how normal everyday Americans have to get through the fucking day. But, of course, she has more to say on this point.
Actually, I'm working on my second book right now, and I've done a deep dive on where this has come from. It's really remarkable to consider that what is kind of being sold to women as loving your body at any size is actually something that is killing women, right? It is not good to be clinically obese. And when you weigh it against society's rightful treatment, the shunning of anorexia, right? If I was to go on the internet and I displayed having, my bones popping out of my socket and I said I didn't eat in a week and I'm so proud of myself and this is me and I don't want to eat, people would report my account and they would want it to be taken down off of Instagram. Obviously, they would say this is harmful to teenagers. Celebrating Finspiration, there was an entire campaign to remove that trend successfully off of Instagram because young teenage girls were suffering from anorexia. Well, guess what? There are approximately 3,000 deaths that are attributable to anorexia per year, yet our society acknowledges that that eating disorder is wrong. 300,000 deaths attributable to obesity, and yet when you look into the glamorization of the fat movement. When you look into the celebrities, them saying that we need to have models that are clinically obese, we need to see obesity represented everywhere, and they're putting it under this headline, this concept of representation matters. You have to ask yourself, what is this actually about? If it's hurting and harming people, we should not be celebrating it. We, of course, do not want to shame people who want to better their lives, but we should not encourage them when they are making their lives worse.
And I'm sure you might be explaining it here in a second, but I am a little confused because earlier she was talking about how, we shouldn't be giving GLP-1s and like Ozempic and shit to minors to make them thin.
Yeah.
And that, all of the extremely bony and such people that are on Ozempic.
Yeah.
But now she's also saying that we shouldn't also pay attention to the extremely skinny, bony people, that we should pay more attention to the fat people, but also we shouldn't do the thing that helps them become skinny, bony people. I'm not saying take Ozempic, because that shit just looks like it's doing terrible work to some people's bodies, but just saying it feels a little contradictory. I get she's probably trying to mean we should pay attention to both sides of it, but
yeah, I mean that is kind of it. Like
I'm just
because Candace herself fought anorexia.
Okay.
Yeah. Candace herself fought anorexia at one point before she was famous, I think. But yeah, she was kind of saying that you should pay attention to both sides of the issue. But
not saying
I also
correctly.
want to point something out.
Yeah.
Something that you kind of stumbled over just now, that in even the extreme left spaces that I'm in, we have to remind ourselves of these things. When you point out a contradiction from a fascist, such as the fascists that want to remove all of the Hispanics from the country, but also enjoy going to their local taco shop.
Yeah.
That happens to be owned and managed by Hispanics.
Who'da thunk? Yeah.
Contradictory shit, holding two worldviews, is entirely normal to these people. Because, think of it, right? Okay, so with say Biden, they wanted Joe Biden to be this sleepy guy who never really did anything on his own, who everything happened, while he was asleep at the desk, but he's somehow also this incredible mastermind, plotting all this shit that they hated, and that he was just letting people through the border because, that's the Democrat plan, but they're so weak and, they're so ineffective. And, yeah, they hold these contradictory thoughts in their mind all the time. So for someone like Candace to hold any kind of contradictory position is completely normal. They don't see a problem with it. It's cognitive dissonance on an incredible level. I'm not going to say it's admirable, because it's not. It's fucking stupid. And when they hold these two contradictory thoughts and that they live with them at the same time, what that does is that blocks anything new from coming in. Because it's such a carefully constructed sheet of paper over just a pit of nothing. Anything that disturbs it can't happen. They can't have nuance. They can't possibly understand. So,
just holding the position of, if you're going to be skinny, you're going to be skinny. If you're going to be fat, you're going to be fat. But be healthy.
Yeah, be healthy, whatever your size.
Yeah.
You be you, and if you want to use a GLP-1, okay, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to say anything about it.
As long as you're working with your healthcare provider on it.
Yeah, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Work with somebody that at least you're paying to give a shit.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, that was all big words from Candace, and I don't know what data set she pulled that number from, but it is wrong. Anorexia does not cause 3,000 deaths per year. It's way higher, actually.
I figured, yeah.
Yeah. I found several results on studies on eating disorders, and the page I am about to read from did a good job of pulling them together in an easy format. So I'm going to read from it. It is from April 13th, 2026, so just recently, and definitely after the posting of this video, if I'm going to be fair to her. But anyway, it is recent. And it comes from eatingrecoverycenter.com. I won't be reading the entire thing, but I encourage anyone that might be interested or struggling to check out the article. Please. Anyway, from the section marked Eating Disorders, Gender, and Sexuality, we read, females are more likely to have an eating disorder, with 8.60% of females and 4.07% of males developing an eating disorder during their lifetime. This percentage is expected to rise over time. Eating disorders most commonly affect young women aged 20 to 29. Elevated rates are also observed among adolescents and women in their early 30s. In the U.S. in 2018 to 2019, approximately 1.09 million males, or 0.67% of males, had an eating disorder. The risk of eating disorders among college students grew by 13%, from 15% to 28% between 2013 and 2021. The risk was most pronounced among female college students, Hispanic college students, and younger college students. Among college students, those who identified as the following had an increased risk of eating disorders: cisgender female, bisexual, queer, questioning, or other sexual orientation. From the next section, gender diverse eating disorder statistics. Eating disorders like anorexia, bulimia, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or ARFID, and binge eating disorder all come with serious health complications, including higher mortality rates. Teenagers, young adults, females, and LGBTQ+ individuals face higher risks. In sharing the latest eating disorder statistics, we emphasize how important it is to have compassion for those who struggle, seek treatment early, and expand access to expert care. Highlighting the eating disorder awareness each February, National Eating Disorders Awareness Week brings communities together to spread awareness about eating disorders and share inspirational stories of hope and recovery. We are proud to stand with our nonprofit partners as we work together to shine a light on the serious, complex nature of eating disorders, the importance of accessing treatment, the power of believing that recovery is possible. So, social economic cost of eating disorders in the U.S. How common are eating disorders? An estimated 9% of the U.S. population, or 28.8 million Americans, will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. In the U.S., 13 to 21% of adolescent and young adult females may have an eating disorder. Binge eating and purge eating were the most, or purging rather, you don't eat purged, were the most common observed symptoms, increasing long-term health risks. In 2018 to 2019, nearly 2% of people in the U.S., or 5.48 million people, were living with an eating disorder. Studies worldwide show that approximately 6 to 8% of adolescents have an eating disorder. The incidence and impact of eating disorders among adolescents and young adults around the world increased between 1990 and 2021, with the highest burden and fastest growth affecting individuals aged 20 to 24. Eating disorder symptoms are seen in people of all ages. In women aged 50 years and up, 13% have current eating disorder symptoms, most commonly binge eating and purging. 1 in 3, now these are women aged 50 years and older, 1 in 3 say they have dieted, quote, most of the time over the past 5 years. 71.2% say they are currently trying to lose weight. The vast majority, 83.9%, reported being dissatisfied with their stomachs. The most common eating disorder in the U.S. as of 2019 was Other Specified and Eating Disorder, or OSFED. Eating disorders, gender, and sexuality. Females are more likely to have an eating disorder, with 8.60% of females. Oh, right. And then I read that. That all came through twice. So, mortality statistics. The statistics are sobering. In the U.S., one person dies every 52 minutes from an eating disorder. Approximately 10,200 deaths a year in the U.S. are a direct result of an eating disorder. Estimates range from 5,500 to 22,000 a year. All eating disorders increase mortality risk, particularly anorexia nervosa. In the U.S., eating disorder mortality rates are nearly 6 times higher for individuals with anorexia nervosa and nearly twice as high for those with bulimia nervosa when compared to the general population. Individuals receiving inpatient care, hospitalization, for anorexia nervosa face a mortality risk greater than 5 times that of the average person, emphasizing the need for effective care. Those seeking treatment for bulimia nervosa and those in outpatient treatment for anorexia nervosa have twice the mortality risk as others. A full course of eating disorder treatment can reduce suicidal thoughts in those with eating disorders, offering protection. And then we have, what factors increase the risk of eating disorders? Multiple research studies have identified a number of eating disorder risk factors, including genes, gender and sexuality, sexual trauma, and more. Here are the stats. Being female in the U.S. increases the risk of having an eating disorder. Having a close relative with anorexia nervosa can increase the risk for anorexia nervosa. Scientists have confirmed that anorexia can be inherited. LGBTQ plus individuals have increased risk of an eating disorder. Out of 300,000 U.S. college students, those identifying as transgender, gay, lesbian, or bisexual reported higher rates of disordered eating habits. Transgender males have higher levels of eating disorder symptoms than transgender women. Transgender women have higher levels of eating disorder symptoms than cisgender men. There is a trend of transgender men having higher levels of eating disorders than cisgender women. Surviving a sexual trauma can increase the risk of an eating disorder. Sexual trauma is uniquely associated with eating disorders even when compared to other types of traumas. Life-changing events can increase the risk of eating disorders. At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, in the U.S. and the Netherlands, those with a history of bulimia nervosa or binge eating disorder reported increased urges to binge eat and an increase in binge eating episodes. 1/3 of Australians with a history of eating disorders reported an increase in binge eating. Overall, the pandemic lockdowns were associated with increased eating disorder thoughts and behaviors, along with increased anxiety and depression. The final bit we will pull from this is on anorexia. Anorexia nervosa is one of the deadliest mental illnesses. The following statistics shed light on the importance of seeking help. One study reported that among individuals with anorexia nervosa, 1 in 5 died by suicide, so that's 20%. In the U.S., nearly all adolescents with anorexia nervosa feel socially impaired, 88.9%. Nearly 1 in 5, 19.6%, nearly 1 in 5 feels severely socially impaired. The median age of onset for anorexia nervosa in the U.S. is 12.3 years, before the teen years begin. In the U.S., approximately 0.9% of women and 0.3% of men will have anorexia nervosa in their lifetime. Women with anorexia nervosa are twice as likely to have an alcohol use disorder than women without anorexia nervosa. If a close relative has had anorexia nervosa, one's risk for anorexia nervosa is increased. Genetic factors account for more than half of the risk of anorexia nervosa. I need a drink of water. Give me a second.
I've come to notice based off the reflection of the light on the keyboard.
Yeah.
You use the IOE keys the most.
Yeah.
Secondarily to the space bar.
Yeah.
Because I can see the wear
The wear pattern on
the wear patterns on them. You also
Yeah.
use H, N, T, and R quite frequently, but not near as frequently as
Yeah.
the others.
Well, the information included there in the article goes on much further detail, but anorexia nervosa accounts for way more than 3,000 deaths per year. I, of course, despise conspiracy theories, and I do not think that there is an acceptance movement directly on obesity. I think if anything was going on, it was noting, after a lot of public pushback, that extremely thin persons were no longer the norm in America. the ending of public smoking, the downtrend of drinking, and the uptake of stress and associated head meds that make it a little more possible for people to cope with life in the modern world, as well as all the other factors we already discussed, I think that led to the body acceptance movement from corporations. Because the only other response to how life is would be to make corporations not only pay their fair share in taxes, but pay their fucking employees better, allow them to work from home whenever possible, and so on. De-stress, allow for work-life balance, and allow for a better lifestyle to occur naturally. Instead, it is just easier for them to push acceptance of the current situation as normal, never mind that life in the modern world is creating fractures between people that can afford a work-life health balance and the rest of us that generally cannot afford to live in the best manner possible. As I've said before, if Candace really gave a shit about people in general, she would be out there pushing for socialist policies that take companies to task and force people like her fucking husband to pay her and herself to pay what they owe in taxes, not to mention all the rich fucks she has deified over the years. Candace Owens' complaints about the modern world are a self-own on her views regarding economics. And now, Candace will continue the body shaming and get everything wrong about a medical professional for the sake of pushing her overall version of reality. I would give a trigger warning about her material, but if a listener is this far into these episodes, it's nothing you haven't heard before and maybe even more tame than you might expect. Anyway, here it is.
And if you want to see an example of how far we have gone in terms of trying to encourage the acceptance of obesity, again, something that is killing people and something that will kill children if they do not find a better remedy, which is a lifestyle change. Look no further than this young doctor. Her name is Nicole Van Groningen, and like a lot of these modern doctors, Nicole has a TikTok, and she works at Cedars-Sinai, and she had this message for her followers. Again, she is an internal medicine doctor. Take a listen.
Here's my hot take as a doctor. I totally agree. It is okay to be fat. We don't say that enough, but it needs to be normalized. If you are fat, that is okay. It is typically not a problem that requires immediate solving. It is not an emergency. You don't have to drop everything in the pursuit of being not fat. Erin said this other thing in a different video that I totally agree with as well, is that it is okay to not be healthy. We act like it is this moral failing, this cardinal sin that you deserve a scarlet letter if you are not healthy. And there's a name for that, and that's called healthism.
I've never heard that word before. Healthism, I guess, and this is kind of what happens is we put an ism on certain words and suddenly say that it's bad. I can't imagine why promoting health would be considered bad, that we would call somebody, a healthist for promoting health, for suggesting that there is a healthy way to deal with illnesses, for recognizing that obesity is obviously not aspirational, to perhaps question why it is that the mainstream media and publications, from Glamour to from Glamour UK to Cosmopolitan to Vogue, to Teen Vogue, are now glorifying fat and putting clearly unhealthy women on the cover. Again, not good to put a clinically anorexic person on the cover of a magazine and say this is health and aspirational, but it is similarly, and if not worse, again, according to the deaths that are caused attributable to obesity every year, to put a clinically obese woman on a cover and to say that this is health at every size, as we have seen on the cover of Cosmopolitan. So again, it is something to question who is behind this push, who is behind this narrative that we know is ultimately not helpful. It's absolutely toxic and it will lead to death. And I think the answer always lies with Big Pharma, because the sicker you are, the more they can offer you drugs to remedy the illness. And that obviously here is the case now happening with Wegovy and Ozempic, trying to expand the clientele and looking at clinically obese children.
So, I am aware that was a lot, and it was only 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. So let's start from the top. Dr. Nicole Van Groningen is a TikTok presenter, and she is an actual doctor at Cedars-Sinai. and from what I can tell is a very accomplished human being that deserves better than to be clip-shamed on a third-rate Nazi podcast. Dr. Nicole used a term, healthism, and Candace said she had never heard it before. Without looking it up, I will give everyone, including Matthew here, a few seconds to guess how old that term is.
Healthism, I'd give it within the last decade to 6 years.
Time's up. That term is only slightly older than me. It was coined in my birth year of 1980 in a widely cited article literally titled Healthism and the Medicalization of Everyday Life. I will be linking to the article in the show notes. The link is to JSTOR, and it is free to make an account to read up to 100 articles per month, which is useful if this is the kind of quagmire you find yourself in. Anyway, in the original sense of the word, healthism is the tendency to treat personal health as a dominant life goal and as an individual responsibility to be achieved through lifestyle changes. It goes from basically saying that health-related habits can matter and jumps right to being about how, quote, people's health outcomes, moral worth, and social standing are proof of their personal choices. The paper points out that health is often affected by factors outside of a person's control, including genetics, disabilities, income levels, access to nutritious food, working conditions, discrimination, pollution, and other social issues. Avoiding healthism does not mean denying that smoking, physical inactivity, poor diet, sleep issues, drug and alcohol abuse, or body weight can be risk factors for poor health and worse outcomes. The critique from 1980, and the same critique being done by Dr. Van Groningen, and the critique being criticized by Candace Owens, is that moralizing health or the appearance of it is wrong. Saying that someone is clearly making good choices because look at them and how conventionally healthy they are, they must be a good person with good concepts, that is wrong to do on so many levels. For example, as noted in our last episode, Candace had a foot issue that required her to undergo surgery. She claimed that it was probably from damage she had done when she was younger, perhaps during her high school cheerleader days, or track days. But then we discussed how her particular problem is known to be more of a genetic issue than an athletic accident. If she had not been who she is with the amount of money at her command, could she have afforded to deal with that issue? It required her to be off of that foot for a month. An office job might have been able to allow for it, but retail? Restaurants? Any number of other work environments? She might have had to work on the foot in pain 4 months and possibly taken out a loan to cover her bills and schedule the medical time off of work had she not been in the position she is in as a wealthy person with servants and a podcast she could even at the time do with little motion. During the time off of her feet, she might have even gained some weight if she were a normie. It would have been natural given the lack of movement and likely some depression causing cortisol to hang on to body fat. She would have had to work extra hard on a fixed foot to get back to size. But in her worldview, all of that would have come from a series of bad choices, not some shit she had no control over affecting her daily life until it could be handled. You can see her as a healthist play out across her body of work. Healthism is unfortunately still very common in the medical industry, and I think it is because doctors are like the rest of us, overburdened with life and comfortable with an easy answer now and then. Candace, always in search of easy answers without taking any time to seek out the actual why or how of a thing, definitely qualifies as a healthist, and I will be adding that to her list of pejoratives moving forward. So thank you, healthist Candace Owens, mama bigot theocratic fascist. Thank you for giving us another label by not bothering to do basic research on the work you fucking present. Moving past that, I want to remind everyone that Big Pharma was not pushing for Ozempic or Wegovy for kids. Concerned doctors and research scientists put in the unenviable position of having patients they could not help except maybe with extreme measures such as bariatric surgery, were looking at this as a possible last method before extreme surgery. What I find most damning, though, is that only people that could possibly afford to do this sort of prescription for their children would likely be the people at Candace's level of wealth and status. I am aware, and I find it equally hilarious and alarming, that the Maha crowd, which includes President Trump and RFK Jr., want to push Ozempic and the like on Americans that could not otherwise afford it, which would give the companies that make these drugs more government taxpayer money. It's kind of like spitting in the eye of the crowd like Candace that helped get them into office. All of this being said, if you need these drugs, fucking get them and use them, and I wish you the best. I personally do not want to fuck with them, but I would never shame anyone that has a need and can go through the process for it, whether my taxes pay for it or not. It's fucked up to body shame anyone for any reason. Candace, of course, has a history of doing it. Before we go on, I want to point out, for the sake of her own history, Candace has discussed how she was bulimic, not anorexic, bulimic, when she was younger, and how she fought it and came out the other side. This has not given her any real sense of compassion, of course. I just wanted to note it, because if she were not a narcissist, she might have learned something from it about life and how other people move through the world. Instead, she became who she is. Now, Candace will get into the insert for Ozempic.
Now, very quickly, we aren't going to do a deep dive on the FDA insert that is available for Ozempic, but here is just the first page of it. Right up top, full prescribing information, warning, risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. In rodents, semaglutide causes dose-dependent and treatment duration-dependent thyroid C-cell tumors at clinically relevant exposures. They're telling you this right off the top. We tested this on rodents, and here is what happened. They got tumors. Does that seem like a decision that should be made for a child that is obese rather than trying to change their lifestyles? Again, parents take this risk, adults take this risk, that is on them. But it is shocking to go through this entire insert and to realize how much they are telling you. Bad stuff can happen if you take this. Hey, just letting you know, I know you're dying to be thin, but are you actually willing to die to be thin? Under section 5.2, pancreatitis. I mean, and I have seen so many TikToks of women who got pancreatitis after taking Ozempic or Wegovy just for a couple of months. They've shared their stories of what that is like, now having to face acute pancreatitis because they wanted to be skinny. There are TikToks of women talking about the hair loss that they have gone through. Under 5.3, you can see that it causes diabetic complications. In a 2-year trial involving patients with type 2 diabetes and high cardiovascular risk, more events of diabetic retinopathy complications occurred in patients that were treated with Ozempic. It also talks about acute kidney injury. Obviously, it can impact your kidneys. There has been post-marketing reports of acute kidney injury and the worsening of chronic renal failure, which may sometimes require hemodialysis in patients that were treated. Hypersensitivity, the list goes on and on regarding adverse reactions. And so, again, it is just worth the conversation to ask why it is that they are pushing this as a solve for teens that are suffering from obesity when there are so many other natural routes that those children can take. And it begins with executing self-control. It begins with parents giving them a good diet, right? An actual healthy diet, learning how to eat healthy, and of course, exercise. But I think all of that now would be considered healthist, as we have just heard from that internal medicine doctor.
The very beginning of it with the thyroid C-cell increase.
Right.
Sorry, facing the wrong direction. With the thyroid C-cell increase.
Yeah.
Is just, if it's being recommended to teens, it is on the parent or guardian and the teen themselves to go, no, I don't want to take that path, or to go, yeah, I'll take that path.
Right.
And while a teen, yes, may be persuadable for that, there's a reason why there needs to be a parent or guardian present. And if a doctor, as most pediatric and teen doctors tend to, care about their patients even a little bit, they'll notice when a parent is going, yeah, no, we'll do Ozempic, without consulting their child first.
Yeah. So,
just saying, it's not like, they're forcibly pinning a kid down and jabbing the shit in their arm the moment they're like, oh, well, Ozempic's your only option.
Yeah. Every day.
Yeah.
Daily injections.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. God, I can't imagine that.
Most kids these days hate needles.
Yeah. So what I have to say here on that is, first, Candace, fuck you for once again getting the initial paper wrong. Ozempic, Wegovy, GLP-1 in general, was not being discussed as anything but a last-ditch attempt before bariatric surgery and the like for teens that were struggling and for whom nothing else was working. I wouldn't doubt that some parents would want to just jump to the drug route, but that was not the focus of the paper. And Healthism is a real thing, as we just discussed. But moving on from that, I read through the official Ozempic insert, and she wasn't lying about what is in there. And the way it is worded, it's fucking scary. The sheer amount of warnings involved. I knew about a few of them just from being fed the occasional pharmaceutical ad, but goddamn, there is a lot of fucky fuck shit to be worried about if a person has to go on these things. Now, this episode of A Shot in the Dark predates RFK Jr. getting into real power, and I want to remind everyone, in case you forgot, the Trump administration and Health and Human Services under RFK Jr. have made it possible to get GLP-1 medications like Ozempic available on Medicaid and other means. I wonder what her take on that, if stated at all, will be when we get there. If you need a GLP-1, that's absolutely fine, and that is a conversation to be had with your doctor. No shade, no shame here. But I have included the insert for Ozempic in the link stack if anyone wants to see it. It is a small PDF, but worth the trip. She wasn't kidding about the thyroid cancer warning at the top, either. It did cause it in rodents, but at the time of printing, it is unknown whether or not it causes those tumors or cancer in humans. So take that as you will. But she isn't done with Ozempic time just yet.
Now, there have also been people that have talked about stomach paralysis that has taken place from taking these drugs. CNN recently ran this article. They took blockbuster drugs for weight loss and diabetes, and now their stomachs are paralyzed. And what it means to be paralyzed in terms of your stomach is a condition called gastroparesis. I'm going to show you a video of a woman who is just documenting her life as someone who has gastroparesis. To be clear, she is not someone who took Wegovy or Ozempic. She's just someone who is documenting her life with that condition, which, as I said, can come from Ozempic and other semaglutide drugs. Take a listen.
I have a condition called gastroparesis, or also known as intestinal failure. It comes as a result of having another condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which affects all of the connective tissue in my body. In a nutshell, my digestive system is paralysed, so I can't eat food. If I eat, I basically throw it back up. I'm in excruciating pain, and sometimes it even causes a seizure.
So there you have it. And again, this is reinforced by that CNN article that I was just telling you about. People that are sharing their stories having been prescribed Wegovy. The medicine made my life hell, so much hell. It cost me money. It cost me a lot of stress. It cost me days and nights and trips with my family. It cost me a lot, and it's not worth it. The price is too high. Now, I have a girlfriend that took Wegovy, and her and I went away together to London with our families during that time. And what I can say to you first and foremost is that she didn't touch a morsel of food the entire 10 weeks that we were there. How anyone can think that that is healthy is absolutely beyond me, but she had no desire to eat, which was quite strange to observe. But the second thing, and the reason that she got off of it, is because she expressed this, that it made her life a living hell, that she was so nauseous all the time, and she was in such physical pain in her stomach, and that even the idea of injecting herself with it would make her want to die. And eventually she realized that this was no way to live her life, that she couldn't even be a good parent because she was so miserable. And this was not a person that ever needed to take Wegovy. This was very much a housewife trend of just trying to lose maybe 5 pounds that she didn't need to lose in the first place. But that experience, that repeat experience people are talking about, and the subsequent side effects that can be lifelong, having gastroparesis, does not seem like something that the FDA should be clearing for children. But they can make money. And of course, the point in all of this is that if they can make money, they will try to sell it to you and tell you why ultimately this is going to be good for you. Ultimately, Big Pharma is here to help.
So, I have included the CNN link she shared in the link stack. Now, before we go on, she didn't give a name or credit to the woman you all just heard just now that she was talking about her own stomach paralysis, and I was unable to come up with anything. but I have no reason to believe that she is a grifter of any sort. In the video, she was laying out, unfolding, a large medical gown or napkin, which is, putting it loosely, it was the size of the table in front of her. And I don't know to what end that she was doing that. Without access to the source, it's hard to say. My first thought at the time was that she might have been laying it out because she was going to throw up or something, but really, I don't know. Moving on from that, Candace's story about her friend does ring with other stories I've heard on other podcasts where they spoke with people that had used GLP-1 drugs to successfully lose weight they couldn't shake, or they took them, hated them, and got off of them. Some of these stories also involve people finding that not only did they have a sudden brain-level aversion to eating, whether it was certain food or food in general, some people also stopped smoking, drinking, and so on. Like they felt as if the drugs rewired their brains in addition to the weight loss. These drugs are powerful things, and I find it beyond reckless that RFK Jr. wants them in as many people as possible. And I look forward to hearing Candace go off about it down the line if she even touches it. Now, in the interest of total fairness and honesty, I will read through the article from CNN. There's a lot of information here that I hope helps anyone considering GLP-1 peptides. I personally don't like what I've heard about them, and this article backs that up, but here it is. They took blockbuster drugs for weight loss and diabetes. Now their stomachs are paralyzed. Joni Knight has a message for anyone considering drugs like Ozempic or Wegovy, which have become popular for the dramatic weight loss they can help people achieve. I wish I never touched it. I wish I'd never heard of it in my life, said Knight, 37, of Angie, Louisiana. This medicine made my life hell. So much hell. It has cost me money. It cost me a lot of stress. It cost me days and nights and trips with my family. It's cost me a lot, and it's not worth it. The price is too high. Brenda Allen, 42, of Dallas, Texas, feels the same way. Her doctor prescribed Wegovy for weight loss. Quote, and even now, being off this medication for almost a year, I'm still having a lot of problems, Allen said. She said she was at urgent care recently after vomiting so much that she became dehydrated. Emily Wright, 38, a teacher in Toronto, started taking Ozempic in 2018. Over a year, she said, she lost 80 pounds, which she's been able to keep off. But Wright said she now vomits so frequently that she had to take a leave of absence from her job. I've almost been off Ozempic for a year, but I'm still not back to my normal, Wright said. The diabetes drug Ozempic and its sister drug for weight loss, Wegovy, utilize the same medication, semaglutide. These and other drugs in this family, which include medications like tirzepatide and liraglutide, work by mimicking a hormone that's naturally made by the body, GLP-1. One of the roles of GLP-1 is to slow the passage of food through the stomach, which helps people feel fuller longer. If the stomach slows down too much, however, that can cause problems. Knight and Wright have been diagnosed with severe gastroparesis, or stomach paralysis, which their doctors think may have resulted from or been exacerbated by the medication they were taking, Ozempic. Wright said she also has been diagnosed with cyclic vomiting syndrome, which causes her to throw up multiple times a day. Allen doesn't have a diagnosis for her stomach problems, but said they started only after she was encouraged by her doctor to take Wegovy to lose weight. She is managing her ongoing nausea and vomiting with a medication called Zofran and prescription probiotics while she waits for more tests in October, the first available appointment she could get with specialists. Doctors say that more cases like these are coming to light as the popularity of the drugs soar. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration says it has received reports of people on the drugs experiencing stomach paralysis that sometimes has not resolved by the time it's reported. And last month, the American Society of Anesthesiologists warned that patients should stop these medications a week before surgery because they can increase the risk that people will regurgitate food during an operation, even if they've fasted as directed. Vomiting under anesthesia sometimes causes food and stomach acid to get into the lungs, which can cause pneumonia and other problems after surgery. So far, extreme and unrelenting cases like these are believed to be rare, and they may be a result of the drug unmasking or worsening an existing slow stomach. Doctors say people can have a silent condition called delayed gastric emptying and not know it. There's nothing on the drug's labels that specifically cautions that gastroparesis may occur. In response to CNN's request for comment, Novo Nordisk, maker of Ozempic and Wegovy, pointed out that drugs in this class have been used for 15 years to treat diabetes and for 8 years to treat obesity, and they have been extensively studied in the real world and in clinical trials. Gastrointestinal events are well-known side effects of the GLP-1 class. This is a quote from them. For semaglutide, the majority of GI side effects are mild to moderate in severity and of short duration. GLP-1s are known to cause a delay in gastric emptying, as noted in the label of each of our GLP-1 RA medications. Symptoms of delayed gastric emptying, nausea, and vomiting are listed as side effects, end quote, the statement said. Gastroparesis can have many causes, including diabetes, which is the reason many people are on these drugs in the first place. Women are known to be at higher risk for the condition too. In more than half of cases of gastroparesis, doctors are unable to find a cause. They may just really be unlucky, said Dr. Michael Camilleri, a gastroenterologist at the Mayo Clinic, said of the people who shared their cases with CNN. On the other hand, this is how the drugs work, although not many doctors or patients understand this or the problems that may follow, he said. Camilleri received a grant from the National Institutes of Health to study how one of the first GLP-1 agonists, a drug called liraglutide, affects stomach function. He recruited 40 obese adults and randomly assigned them to take increasing doses of liraglutide or a placebo, which had no active ingredients. After 5 weeks, he had people in the study eat a meal laced with a radioactive tracer so he could see how long food stayed in their stomachs. People taking liraglutide had dramatically slowed digestion compared with those on the placebo. It took about 70 minutes for half the food they ate to leave their stomachs, compared with just 4 minutes in the placebo group. And that was just the average delay. In some patients on liraglutide, the time it took for half the meal to leave their stomachs was 151 minutes, or more than 2.5 hours. Camilleri said the group taking liraglutide lost weight, and the bigger the delay in food leaving the stomach, the more weight people seemed to lose. Fortunately, people in the study seemed to adjust to the medication over time. After 16 weeks, people in the group taking liraglutide were clearing about half the food they ate from their stomachs in about 30 minutes, as opposed to 7 minutes in the placebo group. Symptoms of nausea and vomiting seemed to ease too. Unfortunately, there have not been these types of robust studies, and so the whole idea that this class of medications actually delays gastric emptying is not as well recognized, Camilleri said. It is conceivable, it is conceivable that some patients may have borderline slow gastric emptying, and starting one of the GLP-1 agonists may precipitate a full-blown gastroparesis, end quote. Joni Knight remembers exactly what she ate on her birthday in 2021. She ordered chicken fajitas at one of her favorite restaurants. She ate 3 skinny French fries or 2 or 3 pieces of chicken and then felt panic set in when she couldn't swallow the food. Quote, "It felt like it was stuck in my throat," said Knight, who had been taking Ozempic for 2 years at that point and was already eating very little every day as a result. Her birthday dinner triggered a bout of violent vomiting. "I thought, I hadn't eaten. How am I throwing up this much?" she said. She went to see a gastroenterologist, a doctor who specializes in stomach problems. They put a tube with a camera down her throat and into her stomach to see what the issue might be. They said, "Your stomach is full of food," she said. Normally, less than 10% of the food will be left in the stomach 4 hours after a meal. When that climbs to between 10% and 15%, it's considered mild gastroparesis. Moderate gastroparesis is when 15 to 35% of food is left. Severe gastroparesis is anything over 35% after 4 hours. A gastric emptying study, a test that measures how food moves through the stomach, put Knight in the severe category. She said she stayed nauseated all the time, no matter how little she ate, and took a prescription anti-nausea medication like it was candy. Still, doctors didn't connect her stomach problems to the Ozempic she was taking. Although the prescription information for the drug warns of nausea and vomiting, it mentions only that the drug causes a delay in stomach emptying as a warning that it might affect the absorption of other medications. It was almost 4 more months until a specialist took her off the medication. Emily Wright, a teacher from Toronto, or the teacher from Toronto, said Ozempic helped her shed about 80 pounds in 1 year, and she continued to take it to help manage her blood sugar, but she always felt sick. She said she vomited every day, but kind of got used to it. She would wake up and throw up, and then her day would get better. In clinical trials, nearly half of people, 44%, who took Wegovy reported nausea, and almost 1 in 4 reported vomiting. Both are common symptoms of gastroparesis. In the clinical trials for Ozempic, which is the same medication as Wegovy but given at a lower dose, 1 in 5 people reported nausea and 1 in 10 reported vomiting. In September 2020, Wright had to be hospitalized for dehydration related to the vomiting, and that prompted her to push her doctors for more answers. A gastric emptying study showed that she had gastroparesis. Her doctors put her on 2 more medications to try to help her manage her symptoms, but didn't take her off the Ozempic because they didn't suspect it was contributing. Diabetes can also cause gastroparesis, but that typically happens only in people who have had the disease for at least a decade and have chronically high blood sugars that have damaged the nerves that control the stomach. Both Knight and Wright say their doctors dismiss that possibility in their cases. Quote, "Everybody said there's no way it's diabetes," said Wright, who had been diagnosed with diabetes for only 5 years when she developed gastroparesis. In September 2022, her vomiting got much worse. Standing in front of her classroom, Wright said, she began having burps that smelled so strongly of sulfur and rotting eggs that the kids began to comment on it. Quote, "What is that? Where is it coming from?" they asked. Then, instead of just vomiting the food she'd recently eaten, Wright noticed that she was throwing up food she'd eaten 3 or 4 days prior. Another gastric emptying test showed her condition had deteriorated. Then the GI doctor said, well, I've been seeing a lot of clients coming in with full stomachs on endoscopy who are on Ozempic, so let's try taking you off the Ozempic, Wright said. Both Knight and Wright say they got some relief after coming off the medication, but their problems continued. Now, Wright said, instead of throwing up a meal she ate several days ago, she mostly vomits food she has eaten recently. For people with gastroparesis from any cause, these stories are the norm. It takes a steep mental and physical toll on people who live with it. Knight eventually had stomach bypass surgery. It's similar to the technique used for weight loss, but can also be a treatment for severe cases of gastroparesis. She said it has allowed her to eat some of her favorite foods again, like a few bites of pizza or chicken. Quote, "Previously I was on an extreme amount of vitamins because I wasn't eating. Now I can eat enough that I'm not malnourished," Knight said. Wright said she's just hoping her condition will improve with medication and time. Quote, "We don't know when we're going to get better. I think that's the hardest part," she said. Quote, "Like if you could give me like a year or 2 years, I would have something to hope for." Drug regulators say they have received reports of stomach paralysis among patients taking GLP-1 agonist drugs. The FDA has received reports of gastroparesis with semaglutide and liraglutide, some of which documented the adverse event as not recovered after discontinuation of the respective product at the time of the report, the agency said in a statement to CNN. The reports have been submitted through the agency's publicly accessible adverse events tracking system, and the FDA said there's not always enough information in those reports to properly evaluate them. The FDA said it has been unable to determine whether the medications were the cause or if the gastroparesis may have been caused by a different issue. Quote, "Gastroparesis can be a complication of diabetes that is related to long-standing or poorly controlled disease, further complicating the ability to determine what role the drugs played in the reported events," the agency said. Asked whether doctors and patients should be warned about the risk for people who are known to have slow digestion to begin with, the FDA said the benefits of the medication may still outweigh its risks, even for this group. Quote, "Regulations pertaining to drug labeling state that a drug should be contraindicated only in those clinical situations for which the risk from use clearly outweighs any possible therapeutic benefit. Only known hazards, and not theoretical possibilities, can be the basis for a contraindication," the agency said. The FDA said people with gastroparesis weren't excluded from clinical trials of these medications, and the benefits for diabetes and weight management, quote, "may outweigh the risks in some patients with gastroparesis or delayed gastric emptying," end quote. Doctors who are experts in treating gastroparesis say they're hearing more stories like these as greater numbers of people try the drugs. Quote, gastroparesis or delayed gastric emptying from the GLP-1 agonists definitely does happen, said Dr. Linda Nguyen, who specializes in the treatment of this condition at Stanford University. What seems to be unusual about cases like Wright's and Knight's, Nguyen said, is that they didn't improve after they stopped taking the medication. Quote, in my experience, when you stop the GLP-1 agonist, the gastric emptying improves and it gets better, said Nguyen, who is also a spokesperson for the American Gastroenterological Association. Anesthesiologists say there are real hazards involved with stomach paralysis on these medications, and doctors and patients need more information about the risks. Dr. Renuka George, Fellowship Director of Regional Anesthesiology at the Medical University of South Carolina, recently tweeted a photo of the stomach contents suctioned from a patient who had fasted as directed but was taking a GLP-1 agonist for diabetes. The stomach, she said, was basically full, even though the person had followed all the surgical prep instructions to the letter. Dr. George explained that this is a cautionary tale. This, quote, this has become more, I guess, front and center for anesthesiologists simply because aspiration is a big concern, she said. Dr. George explained that the stomach and esophagus can handle the acidic digestive juices that mix with food. The lungs can't. Quote, lung tissue is fragile and precious, George said. Quote, if anything goes into the lungs, at best, it's a cough. At worst, you end up on a ventilator for an extended period of time, end quote. She said that as more and more people take these medications, with little information about the stomach slowdown that comes with them, they may not know to tell their doctors. Quote, the big concern is if we have patients that aren't aware of this and don't tell their anesthesiologist because not everybody wants to advertise that they're on a weight loss drug, right? She said, quote, so that becomes a problem because they're not fasted appropriately. The American Society of Anesthesiologists is advising doctors to have patients stop these medications for 1 week prior to surgery to prevent aspiration. But President Dr. Michael Champeau said they aren't sure what the right amount of time to fast or stop the drug would be. Quote, when we issued this guidance, we issued it on very limited scientific evidence, Champeau said. Quote, these kinds of studies, or the delay in stomach emptying, just haven't been done, he said. He said their experts felt that stopping it 1 week in advance for people taking it weekly could be reasonable in the near term. Dr. George said she was aware of ongoing studies to try to learn more about this complication. Quote, there's a lot of research underway. I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing a lot of publications in the next few years regarding this, she said. Until more is known, George said, people need to be open with all their doctors about taking any drugs. Knight, the gastroparesis patient in Louisiana, said people need to carefully consider the risks. Quote, I accepted that the medicine was working for me. I had a major side effect from it that altered my life course. Now I feel like my best option is to try to warn people whenever I can, she said. Nguyen, the Stanford doctor, said patients need to pay attention to the side effects. If you vomit once or twice, that might be normal, but persistent vomiting is not normal. Quote, they should be evaluated. Consider reducing the dose or stopping the medication, she said. Quote, if your vomiting is affecting your hydration or you are having to take other medications to treat the side effects of this medication, then I think it's time to reconsider. End quote. And that is the end of the article. This was printed in 2023. The knowledge base on these peptides and their effects has grown since then. I don't often give Candace credit for much, but if she had not pushed this article, I probably would not have known about it. So this gets the well-earned, good job, Candace, that we rarely throw out to her. Mm-hmm. But then we have to recall how she finished up the end of that clip by also making the argument for us that for-profit medication and medicine is definitely not a social good, since products like GLP-1 peptide drugs are being pushed out at massive profit levels to the companies that make them. Yep. It's hard to push against Big Pharma and be anti-socialist, but she somehow does it.
It's that need for contradictions.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh God, there's an actual term for it. Oh fuck me, I'm gonna remember it. Contrarian. the need to be contrarian all the fucking time. Like, Charlie Kirk was fucking popped, and she has spent no end of recent episodes of her show going over every possible wrong way that it happened. One of the ways that has gotten so much fucking press with her people is that his microphone that he was wearing exploded. He wasn't killed by the bullet that went through his fucking neck. The microphone exploded, which had nothing to do with the gunshot. They say that the microphone exploded because it was inside his shirt. I wish that was not the dumbest thing I'd heard.
It would be more reasonable.
I wish that was the dumbest thing I'd heard, but it's not. Mm-hmm.
It would be more reasonable.
Yeah, go off.
If it were...
Uh-huh.
God damn it. I hate that... If they just... Oh, Lord. Okay, so you know how certain nail guns have powder backing to them?
Yeah.
It would be more reasonable if they said that he had a fucking 27 millimeter screw go through his neck than claiming that his tiny microphone that would have set his shirt on fire. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying that like having one of those things pop on you wouldn't hurt like a son of a bitch and wouldn't do some skin damage.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't fucking kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
not unless it triggered a heart attack.
Yeah, that's one of the many things that they've tried to say.
Saying that there is a construction crew nearby.
Now look, I do not ascribe to any conspiracy theories.
No.
Okay. But the way Candace Owens is going about this whole Charlie Kirk thing, and I did an update episode earlier, I think last week, where I put up Charlie Kirk with a question mark was part of the title. It's because people have reached out to me. Because I'm the only one doing this kind of fucking show. Mm-hmm. With you accompanying me, thank you. Yeah. People have reached out to me regarding all of this Charlie Kirk bullshit with Candace. And I saved it up. I waited till I could get my thoughts together on it. And my thought basically is, when we travel, when we take our little trip from the start of her madness to the current day, what I'm looking forward to is being able to skip all the Charlie Kirk bullshit as celebrity bullshit.
Yeah.
Because the majority of what she is fucking saying doesn't matter. Charlie Kirk was a complete asshole. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he deserved what he got. That's for forces beyond my reckoning.
Yeah.
I also don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
He's gone. The world is a better place with one less Nazi in it, and that is my feeling on it.
And honestly, as far as
now that said,
news things go,
it has opened up a pathway for all kinds of others that want to try to take over his place, not the least of which is his weird-ass wife, who held... Now, okay, the only thing that I will give them in any of this, right, is that Charlie Kirk's memorial service looked more like a rock concert, but that's weird if you don't consider that the Irish wake exists.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
You know? Because I was like, what is the justification for this? Now, I don't know if Charlie Kirk ever claimed any kind of Irish ancestry. I don't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. But for his memorial service to also have been kind of a big fucking party with, like, pyrotechnics and...
yeah.
You know... and rock bands and people making all kinds of fucking crazy-ass speeches and shit. And if we're going to consider the memorial service as kind of an Irish wake maneuver, all right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and it's not just the Irish that do this. There are other cultures, too. Let's be fair. But, you know, if we're going to consider it in that very narrow line of thinking as, like, a party to have celebrated someone's life and influence, then everything makes sense.
Yeah.
I have not looked into it to give it that kind of scope because I give so little of a shit about it.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing I could consider. Now, that being said, Candace was not at the memorial service. I think she was in Japan, trying to hang with Kanye.
Is it back to Kanye now, or is it?
I don't know. I don't fucking care. I think it's still Ye, but I don't know. when he literally made a song recently, and now this was funny, because she used to say things like, "Oh, he's not, he doesn't love Hitler and stuff," and then he makes a song on his most recent album called "I Love Hitler." So yeah. That all said, it's what I'm looking forward to getting into is being able to handle the Charlie Kirk shit in those episodes, these current day episodes, as celebrity bullshit, and to focus on the other stuff she's talking about in the episodes, as we've done in the past. Yeah. With all of her crap with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck.
I'll be honest, I forgot she had shit with the two of them.
Yeah. I don't give a fuck. Unless it matters in some kind of scope outside of that, I don't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't matter. What matters is that she's using the Charlie Kirk material, like she was using the Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and Justin Baldoni shit. She used that to gain followers, because they come in for that stuff, and then they stay for the rest of the party, and the rest of the party is what fucking matters. Not the sample.
Yeah.
Not the crazy sample. The buffet matters.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned with the fucking buffet than I am with the samples. So that's how I feel about it. That all said, if I was going to entertain any kind of a conspiracy on this, it would be that, as has been noted before, by people who knew them better than I ever will, mm-hmm. It has been said by, I want to face this right, Nazis who cannot be believed or trusted in any kind of way, mm-hmm. that Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk were involved before he got married.
Yeah.
And that if you wanted to side rail someone's murder trial, you would do it the way that Candace Owens is doing it, by trying to sow as much doubt as possible that the shooter did the deed. You would want to throw everything off of the shooter of your ex. Not because you hired the shooter, but because you're doing as much damage to the legacy and the actual justice of his death. Mm-hmm. You would throw all of that off by throwing off the trial. The trial is the only chance they have to put someone away in Tyler Robinson's case. He can't be tried for murder a second time.
Yeah.
So, you would do what she's doing, mm-hmm. if you were that much of a jilted ex about it.
Yeah.
That is the only theory I can reasonably entertain in any of this, because of how hard it's going. But then we have to consider that Candace Owens is nothing if not opportunistic, and she saw a chance to bring more people in to do the craziest shit possible that could never be proven.
Yeah.
Which is throw as much doubt on the process as possible with zero concern for how it turns out. Mm. If her work, which she's mostly using the work of other people, of course, but if her work threw everything off the scent and hangs the jury, because you need 12 unanimous votes.
Yeah.
Well, if one person is affected by this fucking brainworm shit, then they can just say no, and the jury is hung, and it can go to a retrial, but these things are very touchy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, she doesn't care. My knowledge of her work is that she doesn't care how this goes, because it never mattered to her to begin with. What matters to her is getting clicks and getting rage bait out there. And this is rage bait for the conservative end of the Nazi spectrum, and it's rage bait for people that want to hate on her, who want to come in and want to laugh and poke fun and then get sucked in anyway to her vortex of bullshit.
Yeah.
So yeah, in any case, we will be covering as little of that shit as humanly possible when we get there, but we ain't going to get there for quite some time.
Yeah.
So I'm not that worried about it, but for right now, I write it off as celebrity bullshit. The courts are doing what the courts are going to do, and Candace is trying to rage bait new viewers. That's all it fucking is.
Also, the Charlie Kirk stuff as far as news goes with all of that.
Yeah.
I didn't forget Charlie Kirk's name nor his death, but I also kind of forgot when that happened.
Oh, I can tell you when.
What day?
September 10th.
Right.
2025. And what was funny was I will never forget it because I was sitting on the couch in our living room next to your grandmother.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, Charlie Kirk got popped. And she's like, really? I said, yeah. I was like, oh my God, there's footage. Oh, he's dead. There's no way anyone's coming back from that. And she's like, let me see. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I showed her. She's like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
And then I showed everybody else. And we were all pretty much under the, like, we all like slate our own animals and shit for food. And
Mm-hmm.
When the neck is compromised, if you're not, like, the only thing that could have saved him is him getting shot outside of a hospital.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Not to mention that.
Like, that's immediate trauma surgery work.
Yeah, the only time you're really going to survive a neck shot is if it's a grazer, not a puncture.
Yeah, and that went straight through.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And that was, as we would all learn later, that was a sharp downward angle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. Like, it was not, he had no hope. Like I said, the only thing that could have saved him is if he had been shot literally steps outside of a hospital or within one.
Mm-hmm.
With a dedicated trauma team that knew exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Because even then, like, that is a death sentence. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean...
You can't really turn a kid a neck.
No. It's not advised.
No.
But, yeah, I mean, that's...
Not if the life of the patient is what you're after.
Yeah. I mean, not like I said, I don't want to fuck with the Charlie Kirk shit.
Yeah.
In any kind of way any more than we ever have to, but we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Yeah. But right now, I'm not planning on touching it at all. We will note it in the episodes and go, okay, so this was another 15 minutes of Charlie Kirk celebrity bullshit, and we're moving on to the meat of this episode, etc. That's how shit's going to go in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'll ask you, Matthew, as the voice of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
We are now about halfway through this episode of her show. Do you recall what it's supposed to be about? Because it wasn't supposed to be an episode on Ozempic.
It wasn't supposed to be about GLP-1s and Ozempic.
Not one bit. Do you know what it was supposed to be about?
Shit, man, I don't know. I know we mentioned it last time we did it, but I don't remember what it was.
It's an episode on the Prevnar vaccine.
Oh, okay.
So before she actually gets into the subject of the episode, let's discuss Prevnar.
Okay.
Prevnar is a conjugate vaccine, meaning it is a blend, like MMR, that in this case protects against a swath of Streptococcus pneumoniae. The vaccine has gone through different versions over the years as science and research has allowed it to expand its scope. The version that was in use most recently was used between 2012 to 2024, and that was Prevnar 13 because it protected against 13 serotypes. And the version currently in wide use is Prevnar 20 because it protects against 20 serotypes. This protection comes from including basically dead bits of the various types of illness causing different strains of strep and pneumonia, bloodstream infections, and ear infections. The body learns the code, as it were, of the serotypes and develops a proper immune response. There are just over 100 recognized serotypes in this class, and covering any of them is a huge boon to people with immunocompromised lives, and the vaccines are generally recommended for anyone, but especially persons 65 and older, and people 19 to 64 with immunocompromised issues. Prevnar is typically recommended to be given in 4 total doses, regardless of health status of a child, given at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and 12 to 15 months of age. There are catch-up schedules for various ages as well if a dose is missed. The original Prevnar became widely available in the year 2000 as Prevnar 7. I can tell you, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I knew a lot of kids that had gotten strep and pneumonia that probably wouldn't have missed time at school or gone through serious hospital stays had this been available back then. I myself had chronic ear infections as a kid, the type that made me scream and writhe in pain. I probably could have benefited from this as well. As an adult, I have rarely heard about kids having to miss school due to these kinds of issues, where they were incredibly common in Jacksonville, Florida, at least when I was growing up. But now, we must engage with our subject and her work, such is the case of this show. Here we go.
All right, guys, now let's talk about the Prevnar vaccine. The Prevnar vaccine, obviously, is related to pneumonia. Per the CDC, pneumococcal disease refers to any illness that is caused by pneumococcal bacteria. These bacteria can cause many types of illnesses, including pneumonia, which is an infection of the lungs. Pneumococcal bacteria are one of the most common causes of pneumonia. Aside from pneumonia, pneumococcal bacteria can also cause ear infections, sinus infections, meningitis, there's that scary word which we covered a couple of weeks ago, and bacteremia, which is an infection of the blood. Anybody can get pneumococcal disease, but children under 2 years old, people with certain medical conditions or other risk factors, and adults 65 years or older are at the highest risk. Most, and this is again being acknowledged right from the CDC website, that most pneumococcal infections are mild. However, some can result in long-term problems such as brain damage or hearing loss. Meningitis, bacteremia, and pneumonia caused by pneumococcal disease can be fatal.
Okay, so just for some clarity, y'all heard some coughing in the background. That was because I drank some water in a wrong way that you're not supposed to, and some of it went into my lungs. So for effect, during a thing where we're hearing about pneumococcal disease and strep, I started coughing. Totally not planned. It sucks and it hurts a little bit, but we're going to continue. So she paraphrased a little, but she basically read from the CDC information sheet on Prevnar and why it matters. I have, of course, included the link in the link stack. So all of that is in line with what we said about the vaccine and stuff a couple of minutes ago. And now it is time for Candace Owens to be Candace Owens.
So again, here's the circumstance. If your child gets an infection of a pneumococcal infection, they will probably be absolutely fine. The infections typically tend to be mild, but mild infections never stopped Big Pharma from having a good time. If there has been one lesson that we have learned as we have looked at all of these illnesses, what they try to do is they try to locate a very extreme circumstance. You know, the idea that yes, most of the time if your child gets chickenpox, they'll be absolutely fine. You can have a chickenpox party. But there was that one case in Ohio where that child died of chickenpox. Now we're going to plaster that everywhere and make every parent fearful of the chickenpox so that every parent in the world signs up to get this vaccine, which, by the way, we are going to tell you right in the insert, may not actually even work at all. We'll have no way of knowing if your child just wouldn't have gotten pneumonia. And if your child does get pneumonia, we'll say, well, look at the vaccine. We promised you that maybe they got a different variety of it and that they still could have possibly gotten it. We get to wipe our hands clean and also ensure that we get billions of dollars, and billions of dollars indeed definitely come from this vaccine, given the fact that there are so many doses of it, usually 4 doses of it. The doses are recommended at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and then between 12 and 15 months of age. That is a lot of this vaccine before your child even turns a year and a half.
That is because that is the age where they are most vulnerable to all these issues becoming either fatal or lifelong problems. I mentioned I had chronic ear infections as a kid. Well, my hearing has always sucked since. My family, on my mother's side, has a history of hearing loss. But who's to say it wasn't always related to things that Prevnar could have stopped cold? Matthew here does not have the hearing issues that I did and that I continue to have. This is one reason among many that any time I have to deal with someone in the real world, I prefer text and or email when sensitive issues are being discussed that might require we come back to them so that I don't miss any details that my hearing issues might have fucked me out of. And as we have covered, the amount of children that have died or have lifelong issues from diseases, viruses, etc. that vaccines stopped is almost immeasurable, because those particular problems have not plagued our society for decades, but they continue to be issues in areas that do not have these vaccines. And now, Candace will describe some home stories that left me aghast the first time I listened to it. But now it's going to become everyone else's problem.
They're going to get a lot of doses of this vaccine, and it's because parents fear that their children are going to get pneumonia. What about the winter time? Here, let me tell you a recent circumstance, and I obviously just had my son, as you guys learned in last week's episode, on November 20th, and we are just well into the flu season, and it was just, as you guys know, a very rough time in the weeks after. Everybody in my house got sick. I assume on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day I had COVID or some form of the flu. I didn't get tested because I don't think it really matters. I don't, whether it's COVID or did it feel like something I could get over? Yes. I was also breastfeeding. Was I concerned that my child I had to breastfeed every 2 hours was going to get what I had? Something told me that he was going to be fine. I got sick. The nanny that we had helping, because remember I couldn't move, also got sick and had to call out. She actually got tested and she had the flu virus. She called out for 2 days and she was pretty miserable. Then she kind of came back because we were absolutely desperate for childcare given the fact that I could not walk. And she was sick. She had the flu. We let her in the house. She was around our children. Somehow, remarkably, my husband never gets anything. He didn't get anything. My baby never got sick. It was totally a risk that I was willing to take. Why? Because children get sick. Because I am utterly tethered to the understanding that in most circumstances, children have the best immune systems. I do not want to violate the natural immune systems that are being built, God's perfect creation, by injecting them with a bunch of pharmaceuticals that have never had to prove that they actually work. That's what is so incredible to me about all of these inserts. There's no way of knowing if they actually work, because if your child, again, gets the illness anyways, they say, oh well. And if your child doesn't get the illness, there's no way they can say that they are the ones that prevented it. My child did not get sick, whether it was the type A flu that she had, whether it was the COVID and the weird thing that I had. My newborn baby did not get sick whatsoever. My newborn unvaxxed baby was in a house with sick adults for the first 4 weeks of his life. It was just like we were all just passing it around, and he got absolutely nothing. So do I now say that no vaccines is what works? That's the new vaccine, no vaccine? I'm just trying to show you guys the ridiculous standards, or the non-standards that Big Pharma has to meet to convince everybody that they should get a vaccine. It is entirely a fear campaign. They want you to believe that before vaccines, every baby was just dying of pneumonia.
So that was revealing. I realize that our last recording was some time ago, but listeners may recall Candace discussing how one of her feet had been operated on and how she couldn't do much on her own. At the time, I called bullshit on her story about being all alone taking care of her kids. She just mentioned here that she had a nanny employed to help. But then, I'm sorry, she tested positive for the flu and she was let back into the home to work? I have worked while sick. I know a lot of people have. And it was almost always persons in the service industry making shit pay, but having to clock in those hours because of a lack of sick days and paid time off and the like. I am also aware that office people and construction workers and such also endure this. And this is why we all need fucking unions. But anyway, Candace couldn't be bothered to hire another nanny for a brief period, and her husband, who she says was around, couldn't be bothered to pitch in, since she says that he has a superhuman immune system. And also, she assumes that she had COVID? It's all a bit much to believe, really. I could see maybe her being ill, but using a breast pump to feed the kid via bottle with someone else feeding them. Kids get a natural immune boost with breast milk. This is a known fact. But having a kid that close while a mother is sick with possible COVID and having a nanny around with the flu is all a bit much to believe. So I do not quite believe it.
Also, making your nanny work while they're sick is another level of
sadism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just laziness. Just fucking laziness, you know?
That too, yeah.
Imagine that phone call. Bitch, I don't care if you're throwing up. You can throw up here. We have bathrooms. Yeah, like, come on. I think if it's true or false, it's really some hot fuck shit to say to a mentally compromised audience.
Mm-hmm.
Next, it is time for Candace to do something a little different while being the same old wink, wink, nudge, nudge she always does.
That wasn't the circumstance. And again, I am so bothered by the fact that it always seems to be the circumstance that they recommend these doses before children are able to speak, right? 4 doses, age 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and then between 12 and 15. So in case your child is impacted by this vaccine, we can say, oh no, your child was born this way. If these are so incredible, if these work so well, why not wait until a child is 3? Prior to being 3, children tend to be at home with mom and dad. They aren't as exposed as the children that are in the school system. So what would be the problem with simply waiting? The problem would be that we had real data. The problem would be that parents could say that my children were speaking, he could count to 10, he knew his ABCs, and then you gave him an injection and something happened to my child. The problem would probably be a mass awakening of parents who refuse to accept that their children were born this way, and rather understood that something was happening due to the routine toxins that we are now introducing into children's bodies. That is what the problem is. It's not just ironic that they want all of these shots to happen before your children are out in the world and are able to take tests and show how much they know. It infuriates me to see this over and over and over again.
And having to point out this bullshit infuriates me. But here we are. I am sure that this audience caught it, but her doing everything but say her view that vaccines are responsible for autism, that was really something. Like, I wonder what was going on backstage at Daily Wire at the time that caused her to hold her tongue on it, mostly. She never had a problem saying it before. And in this case, she was speaking to an audience of strictly paying consumers. So I do look forward to eventually unearthing that business. But on to something else she said in there about how children, toddlers, if we're being specific, don't go around other people until they're 3 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Like, says who? I have known no end of people that leave the house with their children at every age because they can. And people have shit to do. Candace herself has said many times that she takes her kids out to do things, and they live in Nashville. Not to mention how they have all traveled to places like Tokyo, which is one of the most populated cities on the planet, and how they've gone to Dollywood several times. So this is a dumb take, even for her bullshit. Children get vaccinated by and large because life is unpredictable. Any parent that has a child at St. Jude hospitals can tell you that, because whether or not they vaccinated their kid, they probably never expected to wind up there, getting treated for cancer, heart problems, or worse. So yeah, this is a bullshit take, especially from someone that swears that vaccines are not needed and that the world is safe, and is quick to promote the idea that exposure to the many varied things in the world at the youngest possible age is the best thing. Fucking absurd. So now it is time to actually jump into the Prevnar vaccine insert.
Oh, finally.
Yeah.
Now let's jump into that Prevnar 20 FDA insert, because, again, the CDC says, yeah, it's pretty rare that your child is going to get pneumonia that is going to, cause a lot of suffering. It's usually pretty mild if they get this bacteria, this pneumococcal bacteria. But here's the vaccine, and here's what we can tell you will happen or could happen if your children take this vaccine. Here are the risks that you are taking that your doctor is not telling you before he gaslights you when your child does seem to have some sort of a disorder. Again, I always like to jump right into that post-marketing experience, and as listed on the Prevnar 13 FDA insert. What can happen? Blood and lymphatic system disorders, localized to the region of the injection site. They can also develop cardiac disorders, cyanosis, amongst pediatric populations only. Oh, that's a nice thing to have in parentheses. Don't worry, guys. The cardiac events that happen only happens to the pediatrics, the children that are at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months. Nothing to worry about there. Then, of course, they have general disorders and administration site conditions, dermatitis, which you're seeing more and more of. I had a girlfriend that sent me a video of her son who developed what I can describe as a knot in his arm. It looked so wrong, and she said that he got it right after he got a vaccine, and because of that she was discontinuing vaccination because her pediatrician told her that was totally normal for your child to develop what looks like a rock beneath his skin. Immune system disorders are listed here. That is why when we talk about the fact that there are so many autoimmune disorders and we see it written in these FDA inserts, it is incomprehensible that there are so many parents that still believe that their children naturally develop this genetically after giving them all of these vaccines. Here listed, we have anaphylactic reaction, including shock. Anaphylactoid reaction, nothing like going into a full anaphylactic reaction after being given something from a doctor that wants to help. Also listed, we have nervous system disorders, hypotonia. Again, in parentheses, that's only amongst the pediatric population, it's just the infants. Respiratory issues, apnea, again, amongst the pediatric populations. We have skin and subcutaneous tissue disorders, vascular disorders. None of this is normal, and yet you have pediatricians that are trying to convince parents that bringing your perfectly healthy child at 2 months, my baby is just under 2 months, he's 7 weeks old, he's perfectly happy, he's laughing, he's starting to see, he's got no rashes, he's got no coughs, there's nothing wrong with him. For me, it defies common sense to bring him to a pediatrician who claims that it's going to make him healthy in the event that he gets something that is usually pretty mild. To have that pediatrician inject my child with this and for me to bring home a sick baby.
So, of course, you jumped right into the section of the most unprovable stuff that could be assessed to the vaccine. Post-marketing reports, as we have noted before, but we'll likely have to do many more times. Post-marketing reports are done after the vaccine or drug has been administered, and they are based on self-reporting from, in this case, mostly the parents of children that got the vaccine and have to be cataloged as such. When Prevnar 20 came out, it was so new that the reports here are also along the same reporting lines as the ones for a prior vaccine, Prevnar 13. Because the vaccine was made the same in the same labs, etc., it was decided to include all the relevant information for the sake of clarity, and this is noted at the top of the post-marketing section. Anyway, all of that shit she said sounded bad because most of us don't speak medical-grade Latin, but let's go through those things she said one at a time. First, Candace is shitting on the idea of even needing this vaccine at all, and I want to go through the information on why this was developed and actual death numbers along with survivorship issues of not having the vaccine around. So, deaths. Since this seems to be the thing that people such as Candace Owens focus on in these vaccines, how many deaths per year do you think occurred on average prior to these vaccines being released?
I'm going to venture to say per year?
Per year.
200,000.
Well, according to the CDC, link in the link stack, we get the following. Before routine use of pneumococcal conjugate vaccine in 2000, the burden of pneumococcal disease among children younger than age 5 years was significant. An estimated 17,000 cases of invasive disease occurred each year, of which 13,000 were bacteremia without a known site of infection and around 700 were meningitis. An estimated 200 children died every year as a result of invasive pneumococcal disease. Although not considered invasive disease, an estimated 5 million cases of acute otitis media occurred each year among children younger than 5 years of age. The widespread use of pneumococcal conjugate vaccines in children has resulted in a decrease in transmission of vaccine-type strains, therefore preventing pneumococcal disease among unvaccinated children and adults. So it was an estimated 200 children a year died in America.
Alone.
So it's an estimated on the number of children under age 5 dying every year being at 200, which is a lot. But that estimate is based on what most likely killed those kids. And death by pneumonia or one of the variants is a pretty shit way to go. It is not fast.
I almost died from pneumonia.
Yeah.
I can tell you, it's not fun.
No. When the first vaccine was introduced, it cut case rates overall by 45%. And it only hit 7 of the serotypes. By 2007, we had Prevnar 13, and it worked, of course, on more of them. As more people were vaccinated, the rate of transmission of the vaccinated strains was seen to decrease over time. This is what is meant by herd immunity. It's not what the anti-vaxxers would tell you, which is people developing natural immunity or those with natural immunity living past the point the others expire. That kind of herd immunity results in herds being wiped out. The best kind is what is offered with this vaccine and this kind of data on display. An immunity boosted by a vaccine that protects against serotypes that are common, stops the spread of that serotype since less people can be infected to pass it on, and the problem itself wanes with time. With the various stages of Prevnar being available, we have seen dramatic drops in these specific illnesses, causing deaths and clogging up the medical system with treatment. At least that has been the case in America. In other nations, they are only now beginning to get the lesser versions of Prevnar, but they are seeing the benefits in their medical systems as well. I recommend anyone interested, please read through the linked CDC paper. It is estimated, though, that patients without the vaccine or those who have one of the strains not protected against do die on the rate of about 3,000 deaths per year in America, and up to 6,000 on average worldwide. So, can you still contract one of these and die? Yes. But with a vaccine that covers 20% of the known serotypes, and with more new people being vaccinated against it every year, you are far less likely to catch, suffer, or die from the preventable types. And I think that's pretty fucking cool. So what kind of issues are we talking about people living with if they manage to get through an infection? Well, this has been answered by the National Institutes of Health, of course, in a paper titled Acute Organ Injury and Long-Term Sequelae of Severe Pneumococcal Infections. They have a massive amount of information, and I think it is worth going through in full. Read along if you want, or just listen to the horrors that can be inflicted from long-term damage with this class of vaccine-preventable disease. This is from the abstract at the top. Give me a second. I need to drink a lot of water before I go through this. All right. Successful hydration without going into my lungs. So.
Don't need to aspirate while talking about aspirations.
No, I'd prefer not to, ever.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
I don't want to do it while I'm sleeping, hanging upside down off a building, driving, you know?
Yeah,
Seems dangerous. No. Seems dangerous at all levels of life.
Yes.
So here we go. Streptococcus pneumoniae, or SPN, I love that, is a major public health problem as it is a main cause of otitis media, community-acquired pneumonia, bacteremia, sepsis, and meningitis. Acute episodes of pneumococcal disease have been demonstrated to cause organ damage with lingering negative consequences. Cytotoxic products released by the bacterium, biomechanical and physiological stress resulting from infection, and corresponding inflammatory response together contribute to organ damage accrued during infection. The collective result of this damage can be acutely life-threatening, but among survivors it also contributes to the long-lasting sequelae of pneumococcal disease. These include the development of new morbidities or exacerbation of pre-existing conditions such as COPD, heart disease, and neurological impairments. Currently, pneumonia is ranked as the 9th leading cause of death, but this estimate only considers short-term mortality and likely underestimates the true long-term impact of disease. Herein, we review the data that indicates damage incurred during acute pneumococcal infection can result in long-term sequelae, which reduces quality of life and life expectancy among pneumococcal disease survivors. Streptococcus pneumoniae, SPN, is the most common etiological agent of community-acquired pneumonia, or CAP, bacteremia, and sepsis. In low or low-middle income countries with no immunization schedule, it is also the leading cause of meningitis. Accordingly, the pneumococcus is the leading cause of infectious death in both children and older adults. SPN is also a common cause of non-life-threatening infections, including sinusitis, otitis media, and bronchitis, which are associated with major personal and socioeconomic costs. This opportunistic, gram-positive bacterium most often resides asymptomatically in the nasopharynx, but can be aspirated into the lungs to cause pneumonia. From the airway, the pneumococcus can gain access to the bloodstream and spread to other sites, where it can cause disseminated organ damage. Young children with underdeveloped immune systems, those with immunodeficiencies, adults over the age of 65 with multiple comorbidities, and individuals experiencing or who have recently experienced a respiratory viral infection have increased susceptibility to both becoming infected with and dying from pneumococcal disease. Excuse me. It is worth noting that in most pneumococcal pneumonia cases, such as those that do not require hospitalization, there is typically no long-term negative effect. Among those with severe pneumonia, and despite the dense consolidation that can occur, the lungs radiologically return to normal by 2 to 4 months, and most patients recover fully from all residual symptoms within 6 to 18 months. Yet, pneumococcal infections can exacerbate underlying pulmonary diseases such as COPD. They can also cause a tremendous amount of system-wide damage. This damage is attributable to cytotoxic factors released by the bacterium, physiological stress put on the body during the infection, and an overzealous inflammatory response. Strikingly, individuals previously hospitalized for invasive pneumococcal disease typically die sooner than would be expected based on census data, with nearly a decade of mean years of life lost being. This reduction in life expectancy can be attributed to systemic organ damage during the infection. Sir William Osler was the first to describe the triad of pneumonia, endocarditis, and meningitis, and observed the presence of micrococci in the affected tissues and blood in histological specimens in post-mortem examination. These micrococci were later classified by Robert Austrian as S. pneumoniae, which is how this triad of disease developed the eponym of Austrian syndrome. Austrian's work highlighted the systemic consequences of pneumococcal pneumonia and that severe damage occurred when bacteria gained access to the bloodstream and invaded tissues. In accordance with this, SPN is well documented to cause acute damage to the middle ear, lungs, heart, and kidneys. Should the bacterium gain access to the central nervous system, there are especially devastating consequences to the affected individual, with a case fatality rate of 30% in developed countries and up to 50% in lower income countries. As discussed below, the damages incurred during pneumococcal infections persist well after the resolution of the acute infection and increase the risk for morbidity and mortality in convalescence. Many reviews on pathogenesis and the immunological events that take place during pneumococcal infection are available, but few have focused on the long-term consequences of this disease. This review examines the role the pneumococcus plays in tissue and organ damage during infection and the long-term sequelae associated with this damage. Sir William Osler famously called SPN, quote, the captain of all the men of death, end quote. Herein, we state that the captain lingers. Pneumococci that are aspirated into the lungs first encounter the mucus layer, which serves as a protective mechanical barrier for the mucosal epithelium and sentinel alveolar macrophages. These early defenses serve to prevent the dissemination of pneumococci and initiate innate immune signaling and host cell activation. The mucus layer lining the epithelium traps bacteria in its sticky matrix and contains both microbicidal and microbiostatic products such as defensins, lactoferrin, lysosome, matrix metalloproteinases, antibodies, surfactant, complement proteins, and C-reactive protein. Upon contact with SPN, secretory IgA and complement proteins C3 and C5a aggregate and osmonize SPN, respectively, facilitating physical clearance and phagocytosis of the bacteria. Lysosome, lactoferrin, B-defensin peptides, and LL37 are directly bactericidal. However, the death of pneumococci, either by the host or the autolysis of itself, not only results in bacterial clearance, but also the release of inflammatory agents, such as the pore-forming toxin, pneumolysin, and bacterial cell wall particles that intensify local inflammation. Pathogen recognition receptors, PRRs, including but not limited to toll-like receptors and nod-like receptors on both somatic airway epithelial cells and innate immune cells, particularly AMs, recognize pathogen-associated molecular patterns and damage-associated molecular patterns present during infection, triggering an inflammatory response to clear the pneumococcus. So, sneezing and shit.
Yeah.
It goes on to say more about that. And then we get down to the binding of TLRs to their ligands engages adapter molecules that transduce signals to activate pro-inflammatory signaling cascades, including mitogen-activated protein kinases and nuclear factor kappa B. Upon TLR activation, sentinel AM and the airway rapidly signal to epithelial cells locally with cytokines and recruit neutrophils and monocytes, biochemokines, including tumor necrosis factor, interleukin, many letters. Considerable evidence shows that SPN can invade host cells at low frequency, in which case the PAMPs from internalized SPM can interact with another class of PRRs, NLRs, that are found in the cytoplasm of host cells. NLRs have been shown to recognize peptidiclogan motifs, which activate signaling cascades that serve as a component of the inflazome. And then they go more into how it winds up getting into the lungs and enhance the recruitment of macrophages and neutrophils. Notably, since the pneumococcus is encapsulated and therefore resistant to phagocytosis and intracellular killing, this inflammatory response does not necessarily result in bacterial clearance and can worsen disease. When pneumococci kill host cells, there is a release of alarmins and DAMPs, including many numbers, promoting the infiltration and activation of neutrophils and circulating monocytes, which further local immune response. In professional antigen-presenting cells, alarmins have been shown to induce upregulation of surface co-stimulatory molecules, enhancement of antigen presentation in lymphocytes, inducing adaptive immune responses, and the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines, triggering a positive feedback loop on pro-inflammatory innate immune responses. Additionally, alarmins can trigger mast cell and basophil activation and the release of histamine, prostaglandins, and leukotrienes, thus increasing vascular permeability and attracting neutrophils. Bacterial peptides and proteins released into the milieu include matrix metalloproteinases. These zinc-dependent enzymes degrade extracellular matrix components, which then serve as alarmins, and thereby further increase the magnitude of the inflammatory response. Polymorphonuclear leukocytes are effectors of bacterial clearance and help to control the infection, even though they may be unable to phagocytize encapsulated pneumococci efficiently without opsonizing antibodies. They do this via the release of DNA and the formation of neutrophil extracellular traps, otherwise known as nets. Nets trap and kill SPN with antimicrobial proteins associated with the DNA, such as MMPs and serine proteases. Neutrophils also release agents that not only elicit inflammation but also cause tissue damage. These include reactive oxygen and nitrogen species, myeloperoxidase, and granule serine proteases. The neutrophil influx necessary to fight off airway infection must be scaled appropriately to avoid excessive or prolonged inflammation. Excessive inflammation sets the stage for the loss of alveolar capillary barrier integrity, infiltration of additional neutrophils and monocytes, and initiation of a positive feed-forward pro-inflammatory loop. During the early stages of pneumonia, the cytokine response to SPN is largely compartmentalized within the lung. However, as disease develops and becomes more severe, the inflammatory response in the airway becomes systemic, with pro-inflammatory cytokines also becoming elevated in the blood of pneumonia patients. Notably, a robust early response is vital, and patients who succumb to pneumonia have higher levels of cytokines and acute phase reactants in the serum versus the airway, indicating that failure to generate a robust local immune response at the site of initial infection contributes to systemic inflammation and overall disease severity. TNF is one of the earliest and most important mediators of this local inflammatory response. TNF initiates inflammatory signaling cascades that induce a second wave of pro- and anti-inflammatory cytokines to advance the immune response. TNF can also be damaging by causing increased neutrophil accumulation and activation, vascular dysfunction, and induction of necroptosis, a form of programmed cell death. Accordingly, levels of TNF in serum and the CNS correlate with overall disease severity and mortality. Patients who delayed going to the hospital more than 48 hours past the onset of symptoms had higher serum TNF levels, lower blood pressure, and lower oxygen saturation levels at the time of admission, all of which are associated with poorer outcomes during infection. So, if you feel like you've got this shit, get your ass to a hospital. Bacteremic patients have higher levels of TNF circulating in the serum compared to pneumonia alone. Nearly all patients admitted to the hospital have a systemic inflammatory response, as measured by deductible IL-96, 98% in a study. And CRP, moreover, higher levels are associated with poorer outcomes. Compared to survivors, patients who died had higher levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines. It gives many numbers with that, and acute phase reactants in serum. Along such lines, polymorphisms in human genes involved in the inflammatory response to infection, such as chemokines and cytokines, many numbers, local host defense of the lung, and coagulation cascades have been associated with susceptibility to pneumonia and outcomes, including sepsis, IPD, and mortality, also known as death. This is due to an impaired ability to respond to the infection, but in other instances, a far too exuberant response. Meaning your body can go overboard and fucking kill itself.
I mean, that makes sense. It's kind of like people that have died from having fevers because their brain overheated itself and boiled itself alive.
Yeah, like, it's the system is at war with itself. I mean, because it's all confused. So, in summation, an inflammatory response is needed to fight off the potentially deadly pneumococcal infection. The immune system creates a highly inflammatory environment at the site of infection, characterized by the recruitment of immune cells resulting in lung consolidation. As the infection progresses, epithelial cell death and the subsequent loss of vascular integrity results in the leakage of pro-inflammatory bacterial products and cytokines into the systemic circulation that contributes to disease pathology. Scaling an appropriate immune response to avoid excessive inflammation is important to prevent damage from occurring, as an overzealous inflammatory response results in impaired oxygen exchange in the airway, damage contributing to organ injury, and increases the likelihood of poor outcomes, such as widespread organ failure and mortality. Sites of pneumococcal infection include the middle ear, lower airway, circulation, invaded organs, and the CNS. The consequences of severe infection in these locations can significantly and permanently alter human health. Notably, work done in animal models shows unequivocally that bacterial-derived factors, such as a dysregulated immune response, together contribute to this damage. Otitis media is a common malady that affects the majority of children, with 80% having at least one episode by 10 years of age. New infections often arise after viral infections or allergic reactions, as congestion obstructs the Eustachian tube at its most narrow point, leading to the accumulation of middle ear secretions which create a niche for SPN to multiply within. Children with otitis media often experience ear pain, otorrhea, difficulty hearing, and headache. Furthermore, about 60% of children develop otitis media with effusion that can persist for weeks to months following the resolution of the initial infection. In the majority of otitis media cases, the tympanic membrane bulges due to inflammation and fluid accumulation in the middle ear, but remains intact. However, spontaneous membrane perforation occurs in 4% to 30% of cases. The majority of spontaneous perforations resolve within 1 month with favorable outcomes. However, 15% of cases become occluded, preventing drainage of pus from the middle ear and requiring medical intervention. Children with perforations are twice as likely to have recurrent infections, which may be associated with permanent hearing loss. Notably, populations with limited access to medical care, such as in indigenous communities or people in developing countries, are prone to developing complications of otitis media, including labyrinthitis, mastoiditis, extradural abscess, subdural empyema, lateral sinus thrombosis, and meningitis. Swelling and death of inner and outer hair cells have been observed in the cochlea in experimental animal models as well as in human autopsies. This damage was found to be dependent on the production of SPN's pore-forming toxin, pneumococcal. Guinea pig cochleae perfused with pneumococcal had displayed hair bundle stereocilia and damaged swollen hair cells that tore away from the supporting cells, ultimately resulting in hearing loss. Notably, chinchilla middle ears, inoculated with purified cell wall of SPN, exhibited the same histiopathic inflammation seen with live bacteria. Otitis media is characterized as being highly neutrophilic with an abundance of neutrophil elastase, cathepsin G, and lactoferrin, as well as the presence of NETs and middle ear effusions. Myeloperoxidase, generated by neutrophils to kill bacterium, has shown to contribute to damage of the middle ear otitis by generating hypohalous acids. Fluid present in the middle ear was shown to cause a hearing loss of 25 decibels, similar to putting in earplugs, and the loss was 10 decibels greater with bilateral disease. Persistent effusion of the middle ear is often treated with tympanostomy tubes that provide relief by draining middle ear secretions to remove pressure and restore some hearing. In general, hearing substantially improves after 1 year through although full recovery is a relatively slow process, and children with a history of OME had defects in binatural processing 1 to 2 years past hearing recovery. In addition to hearing loss, otitis media causes issues with vestibular balance and motor function that mostly return to normal following tympanostomy tube placement. In children, recurrent episodes of otitis media may result in failure to reach cognitive development milestones, delayed or deficient speech development, and poorer school performance, particularly in mathematics and reading. That was just on the hearing. There's more to go.
Christ.
Yeah. Now, imagine all of that shit, all that fucking shit, and a vaccine can help with none of that shit happening.
Mm-hmm.
To the fucking ears.
Yeah.
Now we move on to lungs. As pneumonia progresses, PMN infiltration occurs into bronchioles and adjacent alveoli with neutrophilic inflammation expanding into alveolar spaces in a manner that eventually obliterates the alveolar septa. Infection also results in the release of endogenous prostaglandins, which induce hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction of pulmonary artery blood flow, into the consolidated lung, resulting in an intrapulmonary shunt and increased oxygen consumption by the lung, contributing to edema, swelling, and arterial hypoxemia, referred to as acute lung injury. Additionally, carbon dioxide exchange is disrupted, increasing the respiratory rate, the minute ventilation, and the effort needed to breathe. Impaired surfactant activity reduces the dynamic compliance of the lungs, furthering the work needed to breathe effectively. Typically, S. pneumoniae is associated with a lobar pattern that can be observed based on the pattern of opacity on chest radiographs. Lung congestion can be followed by the leakage of red blood cells, neutrophils, and fibrin into the alveolar fluid, which changes the color of the lungs to dark red, and for this reason is termed red hepatization. Eventually, the red blood cells associated break down, transforming the lung from red to gray, which is gray heparinization. Resolution of infection is characterized by macrophage infiltration into the alveolar space, clearing the exudates by scavenging dying neutrophils and other debris. During severe pneumonia, acute respiratory illness can develop. According to the American European Consensus Conference, if the concentration of arterial oxygen in the blood divided by the inspired fraction of oxygen is less than 200 millimeters, a diagnosis of acute respiratory distress is made, with the definition stratifying the severity of disease into three groups: mild, moderate, and severe. Acute respiratory disease during severe pneumonia can be described as occurring in stages associated with direct damage to the lung, along with indirect damage incurred from systemic inflammation. In the first 1 to 6 days, there is interstitial and alveolar edema characterized by inflammation, thickening of the capillary membrane, and the accumulation of neutrophils, macrophages, and red blood cells in the alveoli, with evidence of both endothelial and epithelial injury. There is both denuding of the epithelium and the appearance of prominent membranes in the alveoli. During the subacute phase, the next 7 to 14 days, some of the edema is reabsorbed and attempts at repair by the proliferation of type 2 cells, along with the infiltration of fibroblasts and increased collagen deposition. After 14 days, the chronic phase, there's typically resolution of the acute infiltrate, the acute neutrophilic infiltrate, but there are more mononuclear cells in the alveoli and more fibrosis and repair of the epithelial level. The concentration of albumin, lactate dehydrogenase, and neutrophil elastase in epithelial lining fluid of small airways is elevated in patients with acute respiratory diseases. The edema and acute inflammation of acute respiratory disease is gradually resolved in many patients without fibrosis occurring. But the presence of acute respiratory disease increases the likelihood of non-pulmonary organ failure, including cardiovascular failure, renal failure, your kidneys, abnormal liver function, and hematologic abnormalities such as anemia and thrombocytopenia. These are discussed in more detail below. In addition to acute respiratory disease, other pulmonary complications of pneumococcal pneumonia can occur, including pleural effusion, epemia, multilobar infiltration, and abscesses or cavitations. Having one or more of these complications is referred to as complicated pneumonia and is associated with higher rates of ICU admission, shock, a longer length of hospital stay, and treatment failure. So, bacterial factors in this: pneumolysine released from SPN causes lung damage through its cytolytic activity, resulting in the impairment of pulmonary microvascular barrier function, damage-mediated influx of neutrophils, and severe pulmonary hypertension. Endothelial cells treated with pneumolysine had increased cell retraction and gap formation, as well as detachment. Pneumolysine-treated human alveolar epithelial cells also exhibited increased cell layer permeability. Pneumolysine has been shown to induce respiratory epithelial cell necroptic death as a result of ion dysregulation, causing the release of alarmins and stimulating neutrophil elastase release after neutrophilic cell death, all of which contribute to lung injury, pneumococci through the conversion of pyruvate to acetyl phosphate by the metabolic enzyme Streptococcus pyruvate oxidase, produce profuse amounts of H2O2. This is known to induce oxidative stress, DNA damage, and apoptic necroptic cell death in the lungs. Pneumolysin and hair especially potent together and have been implicated in the death of host cells. These molecules also have consequential negative effects even at concentrations below their cytotoxic threshold. For example, slowing the beating of the cilia on epithelial cells. Notably, inhibiting macrophage apoptosis has been shown to decrease pneumococcal clearance from the lungs and promotes invasive pneumococcal disease, as laden with SPN facilitate their own killing by undergoing apoptotic death. In most instances, individuals with pneumonia recover fully. However, during severe cases, the physiological stress put on other organs and bacterial products or live bacteria in the circulation results in systemic organ damage. Patients with pre-existing chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, were 42.3% more likely to experience exacerbations of disease if they experienced CAP. Tachycardia is seen in many patients with pneumonia and can complicate pre-existing conditions to worsen cardiac function. One feature of pneumonia, particularly in the elderly, is loss of cognitive function and dementia. This is far more common and distinct from bacterial invasion of the CNS as discussed below. Many of these clinical features mirror those which are seen during sepsis. Patients hospitalized for community-acquired pneumonia have an increased risk for long-term mortality that is nearly double that of patients hospitalized for all other combined causes. Pneumococcal pneumonia results in a greater risk of death for at least 10 years following the acute bout of infection, with 32% of survivors dying within 10 years. Increased pneumococcal disease severity, as measured by the CURB 65 and or pneumonia severity index, also known as the Pneumonia Patient Outcomes Research Team risk score, is associated with greater long-term mortality. Sepsis. S. pneumonia is a primary cause of sepsis, and this has well-documented associations with poor outcomes, such as mortality and the development of frailty. Sepsis, a life-threatening hyperinflammatory state, occurs due to the host being unable to clear SPN from the airway or bloodstream, and the accompanying dysregulated host response to infection and organ failure. Sepsis is a major contributor to the physiological stress and organ damage that ultimately leads to the sequelae following pneumococcal infection due to septic-associated dysfunction in the respiratory system, cardiovascular system, brain, liver, and kidneys. Notably, many excellent reviews on the pathophysiology of pneumococcal sepsis are available. The features of sepsis overlap with those which occur during IPD, as in many instances, these are often concomitant. Invasive pneumococcal disease, or IPD, refers to when the pneumococcus gains access to previously sterile sites, including the bloodstream and CNS. Pneumococcal bacteremia occurs in roughly half of patients hospitalized with pneumonia and is associated with increased length of stay, the severity of infection, mortality, and risk of developing new morbidities. The mortality rate of patients with bacteremia is around 19%. Importantly, once in the bloodstream, pneumococci are not restricted to the vasculature and are captured by or can invade filtering organs such as the liver, spleen, and kidneys. This puts the parenchyma of these organs at direct risk for damage if overwhelmed. The importance of the spleen in eliminating bacteria from the bloodstream is highlighted by the increased occurrence and magnitude of pneumococcal disease in asplenic individuals. Likewise, splectomized guinea pigs infected with SPN had increased bacterial titers in their blood, delayed clearance, and decreased survival. It is now known that splenic CD169 plus macrophages can be overcome by the bacteria and then serve as a sanctuary for replication of the bacteria and dissemination back into the bloodstream. Something fell. Additionally, there have been reported cases of splenic rupture during pneumococcal pneumonia. Bacteria in the bloodstream can also invade the CNS and heart with devastating consequence. This is the result of direct translocation of pneumococci across vascular endothelial cells into organs. It is worth noting that organ damage incurred during IPD does not occur in isolation, but instead accrues throughout multiple sites in the body simultaneously. This is due to the bacteria disseminating throughout the body. Inflammatory responses occurring concurrently in the lungs, vasculature, and within various organs exacerbate systemic inflammation and injury that can ultimately contribute to the development of sepsis. In addition to direct damage caused by the bacterium, biomechanical stress caused by alterations in circulatory volume and vascular resistance, inflammatory stress, increased metabolic demand, and other stressors associated with infection contribute to organ damage amassed during infection. Collectively, this organ damage contributes to the sequelae of pneumococcal disease and long-term risk for mortality. Survivors having increased risk of adverse events such as heart, renal, and neurological disease. Accordingly, mortality rates among IPD survivors are greater than for individuals hospitalized for pneumonia without bacteremia. 1/3 of patients who survived past 1 month end up dying within the next 10 years. What is more, one 3-decade-long study from IJ et al. Found that most patients that recovered from IPD died before their anticipated life expectancy, with the potential life loss of 9.9 years. In other studies, the presence of bacteremia nearly doubled long-term mortality compared to blood culture negative pneumonia. Pneumococcal pneumonia in itself is a risk factor for the development of frailty, with similar long-term mortality rates compared to chronic diseases such as cardiovascular and cerebrovascular disease. Now onto the heart. The correlations between pneumococcal pneumonia and acute heart failure has been recognized for over a century. In the early 20th century, patients with pneumococcal pneumonia were routinely prescribed digitalis, a drug used to strengthen heart contractility. Hospitalization for pneumococcal pneumonia has been associated with new or worsened adverse cardiovascular events, such as atrial fibrillation, heart failure, or myocardial infarction. In all, studies suggest that between 1/5 to 1/3 of patients admitted to the hospital for pneumonia develop cardiac complications. Patients with pre-existing cardiac conditions, such as heart failure, have an increased risk of disease exacerbations following pneumonia compared to a pneumonia-free cohort. Over 90% of patients with pneumococcal disease who did experience cardiac complications had their first adverse cardiac event within the first week after admission to the hospital, with greater than 50% occurring on the very same day. Severe pneumonia episodes, in particular those with IPD, are positively correlated with increased short-term and long-term risk for adverse cardiac events. The presence of bacteremia increased the risk of adverse cardiac events. One of the best predictive measures of the severity of disease and in-hospital mortality was having higher troponin levels, a biomarker of cardiac damage, at the time of admission. Supporting this notion, the 30-day mortality is higher to pneumonia patients with CVEs. The increased incidence of cardiac vascular events, CVEs, during or following pneumococcal disease suggests that pneumococcal disease may exacerbate cardiac vascular events or even play a causal role. Intense systemic inflammation present during pneumonia places stress on the heart, which requires it to work harder due to decreased blood oxygen and lowered blood pressure that accompanies infection. The increased levels of leukocytes, circulating inflammatory cytokines, CRP, coagulation factors, reactive oxygen species, and vasodilating molecules may increase the risk for thrombogenesis, procoagulant activity, and decreased cardiac contractility. Myeloperoxidase produced from infiltrating neutrophils and monocytes has been implicated in cardiovascular disease, as it can cause plaque rupture, damage artery walls, and activate MMPs, causing further cardiovascular damage. Infection promotes the development of thrombi by activating platelets, vascular constriction, dysregulation of the coagulation system, endothelial dysfunction, procoagulant changes in blood, inducing demand ischemia, and increases the risk for the instability and rupture of atherosclerotic plaque. Increased concentrations of troponins, BNP, and ANP have resulted with depression of left ventricular function and myocarditis, increased pulmonary arterial pressure, and levels of thrombin, antithrombin complexes, dimer, and plasminogen activator inhibitor, along with decreased factor IX, contributes to increased coagulation activation that is seen in almost 90% of patients hospitalized for pneumonia. Alongside all of this, pneumococci also have direct cytotoxic effect on cardiomyocytes. Pneumococci-derived products, including cell wall H2O2 and pneumolysin, are cardiotoxic and able to kill cardiomyocytes and suppress heart function. Pneumococcal cell wall components have been detected in the hearts of experimentally SPN-infected animals and shown to directly suppress cardiac contractility in a platelet activating factor receptor-dependent manner. Platelet activating factor, PAF, activation in cardiac tissue is associated with long-lasting negative and arrhythmogenic effects on cardiomyocyte contractility. Pneumolysin in the circulation is also able to cause cardiac damage, as pneumolysin-deficient SPN have less circulating troponins, biomarkers of cardiac injury, and cardiac damage when compared to pneumolysin-expressing SPN. Cardiomyocytes exposed to pneumolysin experience an influx of Ca2 into the cytoplasm through pneumolysin membrane-bound pores, disrupting calcium signaling that is crucial for cardiac contractility in a dose-dependent manner. Finally, work in non-human primates and mice has shown that SPN can translocate into the myocardium from the circulation and platelet factor receptor and lamellin receptor dependent fashion, establish a niche, and replicate to cause foci of infection called microlesions, serving to directly deliver cytotoxic products, including cell wall, pneumolysin, and H2O2. The transient risk of cardiovascular events occurring, including myocardial infarction or stroke, is 2 to 10 times greater following an acute respiratory infection, and this is positively linked to its severity. Notably, admission to an ICU for pneumonia is associated with the greatest risk of new onset heart failure, myocardial infarction, and cardiac-related death. Beyond acute infection, heightened risk for adverse cardiac events lingers for more than 5 years post-hospitalization. Work with primates and mice suggests that upon successful antibiotic treatment, former microlesions are the site of extensive cardiac remodeling and collagen deposition. Echocardiography of convalescent mice rescued with antimicrobials from IPD still had impaired ejection fractions and fractional shortening 3 months after successful intervention with antimicrobials. Blocking of pneumolysin-induced cardiomyocyte death in experimentally infected mice rescued with antimicrobials reduced cardiac collagen deposition and reduced the extent of heart dysfunction in convalescence. So they were able to, repair it somewhat in the mice, but they still died.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it reduced quality of life.
Yeah, the damage is going to be present if the damage is done, but
Yeah.
it's at least patchable.
It's patchable. Yeah. Like a pair of pants is patchable. It's still going to be weak.
Mm-hmm.
It's still not the same. It's definitely not stronger.
No.
Yeah. Onto the kidneys.
Lord.
Patients with chronic kidney disease are at increased risk of developing pneumococcal disease, and vaccination is highly recommended in this group. Let's read that again. Patients with chronic kidney disease are at an increased risk of developing pneumococcal disease, and vaccination is highly recommended in this group. So please, if you have chronic kidney disease, get fucking vaxxed. Independently, acute renal injury in the form of nephritis has been anecdotally associated with pneumococcal disease since 1872.
Christ.
More recently, several studies have reported pneumococcal disease as damaging to the kidneys, with consequences ranging from persistent proteinuria to end-stage renal disease. End-stage means death. Following hospitalization for pneumococcal pneumonia, 1/3 of patients experience acute kidney injury. Those with acute kidney injury have increased hospital mortality, increased risk for adverse events, including myocardial infarction and end-stage renal disease, and a nearly 3-fold greater rate of long-term mortality in those with moderate and severe injury. Among survivors, acute kidney injury can progress to chronic kidney disease as nephron loss leads to glomerular hypertrophy. God, that's a weird word. Glomerular hypertrophy in the remaining nephrons. While SPN is not considered a typical agent of urinary tract infections, it has been reported that children with chronic kidney disease have had urinary tract abnormalities associated with SPN infection and clinical UTI symptoms consistent with cystitis. Additionally, even in the absence of other disorders, SPN can be the causative agent of UTI, but due to the rarity of these cases, more data is needed to evaluate the involvement of pneumococci in the epidemiology and pathogenesis of UTIs. Postulated mechanisms of renal injury during and following pneumococcal pneumonia include systemic hypotension and hypoxemia that contributes to peritubular hypoxia, including fibrosis. Post-pneumococcal acute glomerulonephritis biopsy showed neutrophil and mononuclear cell infiltration into capillary loops with deposition of nephritis-associated plasmin receptors in mesangial area and capillary loops. Leukocyte-derived myeloperoxidase also contributes to glomerulonephritis. God, that's so... I've never seen that word before this. It's weird to wrap your mouth around a new word sometimes. Notably, pneumonia patients who develop acute kidney injury were older, had more comorbidities and higher levels of inflammatory cytokines in the blood, even those without severe disease. Although case reports exist of SPN causing pyelonephritis and urosepsis, there is overall a paucity of evidence that pneumococcal products or live SPN directly damage kidneys, impairing function. Given what is known about the pneumococcus, and since pneumococci are isolated from the kidneys of experimentally infected animals, it seems likely that a direct cytotoxic effect also contributes to the damage, and therefore more research is warranted in this area. Along these lines, pneumolysin and bacterial neuraminidase have been implicated in damage. Pneumococcal cell wall increasing levels of inflammation and prothrombotic molecules such as CRP, fibrinogen, and factor VII contribute to deteriorating renal function. Immune complex mediated acute glomerulonephritis is a rare complication of pneumococcal infection, and the pathogenic mechanism is hypothesized to involve the deposition of streptococcal antigen and formation of circulating immune complexes. SPN-associated hemolytic uremic syndrome is an uncommon complication of pneumococcal pneumonia that develops 3 to 13 days after the onset of symptoms and is mostly observed in young children. Pneumococcal HUS, or hemolytic uremic syndrome, has a poor outlook, with a mortality rate of 12% during the acute phase and about 10% of recovered patients going on to develop end-stage renal failure. Moving on to the central nervous system. Perhaps the most severe form of pneumococcal infection is meningitis, with case fatality rates varying from 20% to 37% in high-income countries and up to 51% in low-income countries, where patients often face poor access to sufficient medical care. Cerebrovascular complications are very common during pneumococcal meningitis, with arterial stroke occurring in up to 30% of patients, cerebral venous thrombosis in 9%, and intracerebral hemorrhage in up to 9%. Pneumococci most likely gain access to the central nervous system via multiple sites, including the blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier in the subarachnoid space, the blood-brain barrier of the cerebral cortex, and the blood CSF barrier in the choroid plexus. This is also the result of bacterial translocation across vascular endothelial cells and is dependent on pneumococci binding to platelet activating factor receptor and laminin receptor. Additionally, children can develop meningitis while having no obvious source of infection, in which bacteria gain access to the central nervous system directly from either the nasopharynx or the middle ear. While central nervous system involvement most likely is preceded by bacteremia in adults, exceptions to this include those with craniofacial surgery and hearing devices. Because those natural barriers have been compromised by the surgery itself.
Yeah.
And hearing devices like cochlear implants.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one of many reasons why I have elected to not do that shit.
Yeah.
Because the risk of infection is, it's lower in a good hospital. It's lower in America, but it's not
zero.
It's not close enough to zero.
Yeah.
For me to be like, it sounds safe now.
Well, it's kind of like getting told, oh yeah, no, there's some spinal surgeries they can do for you that might paralyze you. Why is "might" such a hefty word in that sentence?
Yeah, that word's holding a lot of weight there. Yeah.
Now, if you can guarantee me a fully bionic spine without paralyzing my ass, or that paralyzation is a 0.01%, then all right.
I mean,
but
look, if I can get a cool Doc Ock spine that works my legs anyway, then I'm not really paralyzed. But I'm still not natural, and an EMP is a very real threat. Yeah, I can stick with the problem I've learned to live with for now.
Yeah.
Let's let science move on a little further. Probably not in America, but it's a good enough excuse to take a trip to France. Like I needed more, but...
Yeah.
Much of the damage incurred during pneumococcal meningitis can be attributed to the inflammatory response to bacterial products. CSF levels of inflammasome-associated cytokines correlate with systemic complications and worse clinical outcomes in patients. MMPs released by neutrophils, neurons, and glial cells, among others, degrade the extracellular matrix, contributing to decreased integrity of the subendothelial basal lamina of BBB, increased leukocyte invasion, inflammation, and neuronal injury. Increased levels produced by infiltrating leukocytes has been indicated in various neurodegenerative processes. In experimental mouse models of pneumococcal meningitis, inhibition of MMP2 and 9 decreased brain injury, lowered mortality, and prevented cognitive impairment. Remarkably, inflammation and leukocyte recruitment into the central nervous system occurred during bacteremia prior to pneumococci being detected in the brain. Human histopathological studies from brains recovered from autopsies of pneumococcal meningitis patients have shown parenchymal damage secondary to intracranial pressure, cytotoxic and vasogenic edema, microhemorrhages, local leukocyte infiltration, abscess formation, fibrin thrombi, cortical necrosis, neuronal apoptosis in the hippocampal dentate gyrus, and hippocampal neuronal loss. That's all in the brain. Yeah. Lesions and hemorrhages and damage and shit. Yeah.
Yep.
Brain diffuse ischemic axonal injury and Wallerian degeneration have been shown in brain autopsy and experimental pneumococcal meningitis. Brain structural damage can result from vasospasms and reduced blood flow, eventually causing cortical necrosis and apoptotic cell death in the dentate gyrus. Accordingly, blocking leukocyte invasion either by pharmaceutical inhibition of selectins or antibodies against endothelial intracellular adhesion molecules or leukocyte integrin attenuated the increased cerebral blood flow and intracranial pressure seen in early meningitis, inhibited leukocyte accumulation, brain edema, inflammation, and immediate damage. Now that's assuming you're getting treated.
Yeah.
That's assuming you're like, oh shit, might be pneumonia, let me go to the hospital, and they get you on a round of treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's assuming that happens.
Yeah. Pneumolysin, H2O2, and autolysin mediate brain cell mitochondrial damage and apoptosis of neurons, not neutrons, neurons, through P38 activation, as well as intrinsic and extrinsic capsase-dependent programmed cell death. Notably, the symptoms of meningitis can be replicated by injecting components of pneumolysin or SPN cell wall into the central nervous system. This is due to their cytotoxic properties and the inflammatory response generated by the central nervous system, respectively. Meningeal inflammation significantly increased following antibiotic treatment attributed to bacterial lysis and release of cell wall. However, by reducing the inflammatory response during antibiotic therapy, using inhibitors, some of the damage caused by host cells was mitigated. Further, corticosteroid treatment has been shown to reduce central nervous system inflammation, severe morbidities, and case fatality rates. Up to 30% of patients that survive meningitis have some type of neurological or neurobehavioral sequelae, which is ongoing damage. These include seizures, hearing and vision loss, cognitive impairment, neuromotor disability, and memory or behavior changes. In adult survivors of community-acquired pneumococcal meningitis from a Dutch nationwide prospective cohort study, 34% had persistent neurologic sequelae, most commonly hearing loss, 27%. Neurophysical evaluation revealed that patients who recovered from meningitis performed worse than control patients with alertness and cognitive flexibility with cognitive impairment seen in up to 14% of patients. Cognitive impairment occurred in all domains, most commonly cognitive speed at 71%, but attention, 60%, and memory, 61%, were also affected. Survivors had lower quality of life scores, social functioning, and perceived health than those who had not experienced pneumococcal meningitis. Even healthy children and adults without apparent neurological deficits are at risk for long-term cognitive deficits following pneumococcal meningitis. Early identification and antibiotic/corticosteroid treatment is important to achieve a successful return to society. Frailty is a state of vulnerability and loss of resilience to a variety of stressors that increase the risk of a variety of health-related problems that require hospitalization, including pneumonia. There seems to be a bidirectional relationship between pneumonia and cognitive function, in which cognitive decline increases the risk for pneumonia, while patients with pneumonia are at increased risk of subsequent dementia. In older adults, hospitalization for pneumonia has been associated with a subsequent decline in physical and cognitive abilities, along with the development of depressive symptoms. Some patients that survived severe illness had persistent reduced physical quality of life 5 years after their illness, despite pulmonary function returning to normal. ICU-acquired weakness or paresis is common in survivors of critical illness and associated with worse outcomes, such as increased hospital mortality, long-term function, and quality of life outcomes. Pneumonia is not only life-threatening but life-altering and can trigger a cycle of increased severity of frailty, leading to accelerated aging, functional decline, and mortality. While the majority of patients recover from respiratory symptoms within 2 to 3 weeks following infection, the general well-being of patients resolves more gradually. Many pneumonia survivors do not recover fully to their pre-infectious state after the cessation of antibiotics and still experience residual symptoms for months. Older patients and those with premorbid conditions take longer to recover and had a lower health-related quality of life as measured by physical functioning and general and perceived health. However, it is important to note that while age is an important predictor of long-term mortality, pneumonia does also appear to cause excess long-term mortality in young populations as well. For example, 10% of patients were hospitalized within 30 days of their pneumonia diagnosis, and nearly 3/4 of survivors were hospitalized again within a 5-year period for any cause. The most common cause of death among pneumonia survivors was cardiovascular disease, followed by respiratory diseases and cancers. Survivors are at increased risk for new onset heart disease for up to 5 years post-hospitalization, and strikingly, 20% of survivors developed new or worsening congestive heart failure within 30 days of hospitalization. One of the greatest predictors of long-term mortality following pneumococcal pneumonia is the presence and number of comorbid chronic conditions, including cardiovascular disease, respiratory diseases, diabetes, kidney disease, liver disease, dementia, seizures, and cancer. Several studies have found an association between the presence of comorbidities and long-term mortality, with a larger number of comorbidities predicting greater long-term mortality. So, the more problems you got when you got pneumonia, the more fucked you are.
Yep. That's why people getting pneumonia when they had COVID was such a bad thing.
Oh, yeah. Additionally, a substantial body of evidence supports that advanced stage is associated with increased long-term mortality after recovery from pneumonia. Notably, racial disparity exists, with black individuals having higher rates of both short-term and long-term mortality, as well as an increased likelihood of developing additional morbidities, such as heart failure, gastrointestinal bleeding, frailty, stroke, and myocardial infarction. Potential reasons for these discrepancies in mortality include genetics, socioeconomic factors, and the presence of additional comorbidities, which are disproportionately higher among African Americans, which together raise the risk for severe infection. Evidence specific to older adults suggests that older adults exhibit excessive pro-inflammatory cytokine levels after acute pneumonia that are associated with morbidity and mortality. In accordance with this, higher systemic levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines at discharge can predict both short-term and long-term mortality after hospitalization for pneumonia. Males appear to accentuate this age-related dysfunction in the resolution of inflammation. In addition to inflammatory cytokines, several studies have looked into various biomarkers to attempt to predict short and long-term outcomes, showing that high serum glucose, blood urea, nitrogen albumin ratio, creatinine, pro-arterial peptides, proendolin-1, pro-vasopressin, CRP, troponins, hemostasis markers, and white blood cell count, as well as low serum albumin and alanine aminotransferase, all had a high predictive power for short and long-term mortality, with proadrenomegaline consistently being one of the best indicators of outcomes. The clinical power in utilizing biomarkers such as proadrenomegaline, along with pneumonia severity indexes, should be used to identify and guide treatment in patients at high risk for the development of new morbidities or mortality, so they can be carefully monitored to attempt to reduce long-term consequences. Currently, the most effective strategy for clinicians to address pneumococcal infections is prompt access to care, accurate diagnosis, rapid antibiotic delivery, and disease prevention by implementing widespread vaccination against the pneumococcus. Many groups have published guidelines for the management of pneumococcal disease, including the American Thoracic Society, the Infectious Diseases Society of America, and the British Thoracic Society, that indicates patients should be treated with an agent that specifically targets pneumococcus, recommending monotherapy and macrolide therapy for severe cases. Early administration of antimicrobials is associated with a better prognosis, and failure to use antibiotics concordant with IDSA and ATS guidelines has been associated with an increased risk of in-hospital mortality and more than a 5-fold increase in 30-day mortality. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, the ACIP, recommended adults older than 65 years and adults 19 to 64 with underlying medical conditions or other risk factors be vaccinated. Annual vaccination against seasonal influenza viruses is recommended in all patients, as influenza predisposes individuals to pneumococcal infection. Additionally, individuals with chronic kidney disease are recommended to receive pneumococcal conjugate vaccines, as this has been shown to reduce vaccine type IBD by 75% in these individuals, as well as lower overall mortality, especially when a pneumococcal vaccine is used in combination with an annual influenza vaccine. This is crucial as patients with end-stage renal disease are between 10 and 16-fold more likely to die from pneumonia than the general population. Vaccination against SPN has also been effective in reducing meningitis. However, serotype replacement has led to an emergence of non-vaccine serotypes that have reduced the overall effect of vaccination on pneumococcal meningitis incidence in Europe and North America. The Global Vaccine Action Plan has committed to extending the availability of pneumococcal vaccines to low and lower middle income countries in an effort to relieve some of the burden of pneumococcal disease. Following the introduction of PCV10 in Brazil, there was a 10% decline in pneumonia mortality in children, and similar large benefits are expected when PCVs are introduced in other low-income settings. Currently, many countries routinely vaccinate adults. There is controversy in policies such as whether the use of PCV is clinically and cost-effective, what age group should be vaccinated, and whether repeat dosing can prove beneficial. There is controversy that exists on the efficacy of pneumococcal vaccination in reducing overall long-term mortality and the consequences of pneumococcal disease. However, research has shown pneumococcal vaccination to be effective at preventing pneumonia and IPD in older adults who are at higher risk. With an aging population that is expected to double by the year 2050, it is becoming increasingly important to extend vaccination for the promotion of healthy aging. Considering the drastic long-term effects that pneumonia can have, pneumococcal vaccination should be implemented to reduce pneumococcal disease burden, as research has shown that even slight clinical effectiveness is highly cost-effective. Indeed, vaccination in the elderly has been associated with lower hospitalization rates for pneumonia, mortality, and medical cost. PPV is effective at preventing IPD even in immunocompromised patients. Routine infant immunization with PCV has reduced all-cause pneumonia, hospital admissions, cases of acute otitis media, IPD, and mortality in children under 5. While research investigating the effect of vaccination on the long-term consequences of pneumonia is scarce, considerable evidence does support the beneficial effects of the pneumococcal vaccination, and the wider use of vaccination should be implemented. Pneumonia is currently considered the 9th leading cause of death, but this estimate only takes into account short-term mortality of up to 30 days and likely underestimates the overall morbidity and mortality that results from the pneumococcus. Evidence supports that SPN contributes to the new development of worsening life-threatening comorbidities and long-term mortality in coming years. Further research is needed to understand the long-term sequelae of pneumococcal disease to come up with better preventatives and treatments, so that this captain of death no longer lingers. And that is the paper. It has a few illustrations and a ton of links embedded in itself to point readers to more information if needed, but the gist is pretty simple. Do you want to avoid all of this bullshit?
Take the vaccine.
Well, have we got a vaccine for you?
Mm-hmm.
I encourage everyone that doesn't have this vaccine in your system yet, if you can get it, please do so. If you live in America, contact your local county health department, or if they have a website, visit it and get yourself vaxxed. Pneumonia is a shitty way to die, and as you have just heard, the long term on a lot of this stuff also sucks. Candace, of course, does not touch on any of this, and here she is again, blaming her ghost enemy of Big Pharma for unproven post-marketing results.
That to me defies common sense, and really the entire push of Big Pharma has been to make parents defy their common parental instincts. Your common parental instincts that say I should keep my child healthy as long as possible. Your common parental instincts that don't actually make you fearful when your child gets a cold. You know, you have first-time parenting, of course, everything seems like the end of the world. I'm on my 3rd kid now. You're like, oh, you're fine. They're all going to get it. Am I going to get it? Everyone's going to be fine. But trusting your instincts, you know, the way that I trusted my instinct that I knew, of course, what was I going to do? Quarantine myself away from my baby?
Yes.
He's got a perfect immune system. He's just come into the world. There's nothing better for him than to have his mother's milk. the entire purpose of Big Pharma for me, and I hope that what you are starting to see as we explore this, seems to just make parents question their gut instinct. And as I've said from the very beginning of this series, your gut instinct matters. There is in my opinion, women especially are equipped with something that is God-given in your gut. It is that feeling that you get when you're on a playground and someone just doesn't look right. You go to the school, it's just a vibe you get and you can't explain it. You cross the street when you see somebody. You're walking in the grocery store, you're with your kid, and somebody's just giving you a vibe. You have a society that's blaring at you to ignore that vibe. Trust the experts. Trust the experts like the lady that I just showed you that told you that fat is healthy. Fat is fine. It's totally good. To say otherwise turns you into a healthist. These are the experts that you are trusting. And I don't believe that, as I've said from the beginning of this, that doctors like her intend to be harmful. I believe that they are similarly brainwashed in the way that parents have been for a long time brainwashed, and that when they get into medical school, they are being inserted into a system that is teaching them these things systematically, and that they are unfortunately also a part of a culture. And cultural pressures matter. Going back to that example of everyone wanting to be a part of the fat acceptance movement, we shouldn't accept things that don't make us healthy. It's okay to say, no, actually, I don't want to accept that. I am a little fat and I want to lose weight. That's aspirational. And so I just want to, I guess, make you guys focus more on that, of societal peer pressure and how much it is impacting all of us within the home, to the extent that we are no longer looking after our own children. We're just trusting doctors in lieu of trusting ourselves. Now, just taking a quick look, by the way, at these ingredients that are in Prevnar, we have...
Okay, before she gets into that, let's discuss a tactic she does, and that Alex Jones has done, as well as any number of fascists in media, in not only this age, but in ages past. Fascism is always different by region, but the same in general, and it relies on certain patterns of behavior, especially among the propaganda class. And part of that is two things she just did here. The first is telling you to disregard subject matter experts. The same people in this fascism group that would tell you that college should only exist for people seeking degrees in practical subjects and should not exist for artists, philosophers, and so on, are also the same people that will shit on well-schooled researchers, doctors, historians, and the like. They will and do call into question everything these people have ever said or done if it does not align with their very specific worldview, and it often does not align with that. Second, and related to the first, we've also discussed this before, but it bears repeating, the call to a gut instinct. Calling to a gut instinct that overrides experts in a field and overrides a person's curiosity to understand what they don't know, perhaps by consulting an expert. There is a difference between thinking someone in a park is bad news and casting that same aspersion on a doctor or other physician that is employed literally to keep your health going well. Candace has also absolutely told her listeners in past episodes highlighted on this show, she has told people to be combative at their doctors and has praised their stories where they have claimed to have done so. Candace does not want people asking legitimate questions of legitimate experts, because they might get answers and they might start to question her and others. But she knows what most grifters know, which is that her audience will probably never do that. But if she has done her job well, when they meet someone that knows what they are talking about on any of these subjects, they can get combative or block them out because the person they trust has said it is okay. Fucking absurd. So now, let's hear her version of the Prevnar ingredients.
Polysorbate, we have aluminum phosphate, we have a word that I can hardly say, but I'm going to go for it, Corynebacterium diphtheriae CRM197 protein, we have sodium chloride, and we have succinate dianion. No idea what that is, but I will ask the question again whether or not you are comfortable with milliliters of all of these chemicals being put into your infant's body.
Yes, because most of those are inactive ingredients, Candace. which on the video it even says that those are the inactive ingredients. Everything she said, of course, only sounds scary to anyone that hasn't bothered to look them up. Naturally, I did, and here we go. Number 1, aluminum phosphate is an adjuvant that helps stimulate the immune system response. Polysorbate 80 is a surfactant and stabilizer for the vaccine. Succinate buffer maintains the pH of the formula so that it doesn't separate. Sodium chloride is the salt component that helps it stay stable. Water, which of course helps with it being an injectable fluid. Corynebacterium diphtheria, the one she struggled with, is the carrier protein, also known as CRM197, and it is linked to the 20 pneumococcal sugars that make up the active part of the vaccine. The body basically links these all together on the back of it, allowing for a stronger immune system response to the antigens. It is a non-toxic variant of diphtheria, and it is basically dead. It's the road that the body uses to understand the active ingredients and use them sensibly. Again, we are on the same internet, and she could have looked this shit up but chose not to do so because her fucking brand is ignorance. Next.
The answer for me is a strong no. I now have 3 unvaxxed, perfectly healthy children. And so I can no longer buy into the delusion that if I don't vax my children, they're going to die. When I say perfectly healthy, my children hardly get sick. And when they do get sick, it's usually because we have brought them around other children who are likely vaxxed. And you bring them out and you can't protect them from those illnesses. And they're fine. They are fine. And so I hope that in watching this series, you will also develop that courage to simply understand that sickness does not mean dying, that there is no amount of big pharma, doctors, there's no amount of vaccines that is ever going to prevent your children and you from being sick. It's a part of life. Animals get sick, mammals get sick. We are mammals. You are meant to get sick. Your body actually gets sick so that you can build up the antibodies to fight illness in the future. Stop allowing people to make you fearful of that natural biological process that is taking place.
Again, what the fuck, Candace? I think one of the things I bristle at the most in all of this is the use of the word unvaxxed. You can't unvax your kids if they were never vaxxed to begin with. Maybe it's pedantic to focus on that, but it opens up some dumb doors where someone can get the wrong ideas. But anyway, skipping past that very dumb abusive language, sickness does happen. Vaccines help make it so that a particular set of sickness-causing microbes do not make you suffer short or long-term effects or die before a natural lifespan has occurred. That brings us into Pay Pig comments, so here we go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now I want to jump into some of your comments regarding episodes past. We talked about the MMR vaccine. Sun and Sports Night writes, our entire family got measles, bumps, chicken pox, whooping cough. They were a bit uncomfortable, but nobody died and nobody panicked. It was a rite of passage into lifetime immunity. Again, I asked that question for you guys that were born millennial generation, and we were made to be so fearful of measles and mumps. Talk to your parents, and this guy is telling you everybody just got it in the same way that we got chickenpox. There is nothing to be fearful of.
This is some hot bullshit. So we discussed all of these things before, and I actually did speak with my relatives growing up about why I needed my shots for school, and they were candid with me about how life was before the vaccines. And I'm in, Gen X. It sounded scary and terrible, and they did not want me to suffer, and taught me how to take the shots I needed so that they wouldn't hurt. So yeah, by all fucking means, ask your non-idiot older relatives about life before the rollout of these vaccines. Oh, and by the way, as we have covered, having lived through any of the vaccine-preventable diseases does not make everyone immune for the rest of their lives. Reinfections can occur on any of them, even after having any of them. It is advisable to get vaxxed so that the chances of recurrent infection are next to none. This goes especially for anyone that got chickenpox before the vaccine, because guess what, fam? We are all at risk of developing shingles, so please get the fucking shingles vaccine as soon as possible. And also, Candace herself should know quite a bit about reinfection from illness, as she has claimed to have had COVID several times now, even though, as we covered in this episode, she is also unlikely to actually get tested to find out, because she is a fucking asshole. Moving on, another idiot that has commented on past episodes.
Fallon writes, I was pro-vax until having a child and having to make life-altering decisions for them and not myself. I now think twice about every decision. Thank you for taking a stance and allowing others to feel comfortable stepping outside of the norm. As a medical provider myself, it's frowned upon, but I'm a mom first now. As I have said from the beginning of this series, and in every capacity and everything that I do, I'm a mother first as well. And this was not an easy series to produce. I understood the smears that I would have to face, and I will tell you that I never questioned it. I was excited every single day to break into, to bring forth a new cultural conversation and to challenge mothers to go with those gut instincts and to follow the gut into the facts, right? To explore, to do your own research. As I always say, I'm not a doctor, but I am showing you this stuff from the FDA and the CDC website. It is so right in front of our face, and yet it is so hidden. And it is just, it makes me happy when I hear these comments from people that are making different decisions for themselves and their households.
Yet again, I don't know who Fallon is, but if they actually work in healthcare, I wish them a very fired and unlicensed future. This is such bullshit again. And I have done more research than Candace has ever done on anything, and she had people hired for this. Plus, as we covered way back near the start of this podcast, the Daily Wire had fact checkers and legal staff at some point, and they willingly let this bullshit through. Candace claiming the shield of, I'm just a mom, I'm not a doctor, and also claiming that there are medical conspiracies and shit is entirely fucking gross. She's a mother all right, and an unfit one at that. If anything, shit like this should be lawsuit material for whenever her husband divorces her and fights for sole custody, no visitation. Yes, I'm wishing that on her because she is a shitty human that appeals to emotion to the detriment of other people that don't know better and won't take the time to fact check a person like her. If we were outside, I would spit on the ground.
Thank
Kennedy
you for not
writes,
spitting
my
on my
husband
floor.
says this all the time. His brother regressed after the MMR vaccine. He now is completely dependent, nonverbal, can't feed himself, in diapers, self-injury behaviors, seizures, needs to take 15 different meds just to get through every day, and basically needs tranquilizers or he won't sleep. But thank God he didn't get a rash when he was younger. I've shared this on past episodes, but yes, I have a young woman that works for me, and her brother is the same. He is a non-verbal, can't feed himself, he is in diapers, and he's in his 30s, and her mother says the exact same thing. It happened after his 2-month vaccines. He had a seizure, and he was never the same. More of these stories should be shared, because I would bet that any of these people, if they could go back, if they could wind back the clock, and they could have just gotten the pneumonia, or gotten the measles, or gotten the mumps, or gotten the rubella, versus having their child have had a seizure which altered their life, I bet they would go back and they would say, give me all the measles and all of the mumps.
How's that working out these days, Candace? As we covered on the MMR episode about 5 episodes back, which I gave a re-listen to the other day, so my anger on this is still fresh on the surface, there is no such thing as regressive autism, especially not after an MMR shot or the full run. If anything, I believe that anyone claiming such, as was shown in the reporting done by Brian Deere that we read from, the kid was likely doing all the things before the shot, but the parents found an easy scapegoat in the MMR. People choosing to live through the measles and all right now, we have to point out the research. We have to point out the research notes on the measles as being that a measles infection and things that come with it, such as encephalitis, sometimes take 7 to 10 years to show up in a patient. Living through it is not a silver bullet, and if her research was worth the fucking shit, she would know this, and I really hope that the parents of these kids that have contracted measles over the last year or two are shunned by their kids later in life. Fuck those fucking fuckers. As for the kids, I hope they get through it, but carry that chip on their shoulders well into the future.
This person writes, we live in California. During the measles outbreak that started at Disneyland in 2013, we actually got kicked out of our pediatrician's office due to not being fully vaccinated for measles. It was humiliating. Our final visit there to pick up their medical records, we were escorted through the back door as so not to expose other people. They said we could rejoin the medical group if my son got a whopping 21 shots in a month. I was flabbergasted. It was a terrible experience, and I truly realized that a little power can make a human treat others like they are less than. Never again. How's that for the Hippocratic Oath? Escorting parents who refuse to allow you to inject their children with 21 vaccines in a month out the back door, treating them like they should be stigmatized, ostracized from society. You either give your children to science, you either give your children to big pharma so that we can guarantee our billions of dollars in profits, or we will shame you. That's a horrible story, obviously, and I'm glad that you shared it, because I would have been proud to walk in there and to take those medical records, because I will not be imprisoned in that way. And that is really what it is. It is women that are being told to go against their gut instincts so that they won't be shamed. I mean, you can't even speak to what Big Pharma has built, but especially in states like California. And I know that so many of you ask, what can I do if I live in California? I don't have an answer to that. That state seems to have taken full control over children. But I would like to offer, if you live in California, if you live in a state like California, Connecticut is another one, please in the comments share, network with one another in the comments on our Shot in the Dark DW, at Shot in the Dark DW handle on Instagram, because that's the only way that people are going to know what they can do. Mothers talking to mothers, hey, do you have a doctor that is okay with me delaying or not vaccinating at all? We have to create that sort of a network.
If there were ever a reason to thank Ben Shapiro for anything, then this would be it. When Candace's material was pulled from Daily Wire Plus, all of the Shot in the Dark went with it, as well as the Instagram shit, all blipped out of digital life like it never even happened. Of course, people re-upload this crap, that's how I got it, but it is harder to find, and anything that takes actual research to find is beyond the target audience for this bullshit. Ben Shapiro is still one of the worst people alive in our current world, but at least this whole thing is done. As for her jab at the Hippocratic Oath, she can fuck right off. I would thank a doctor for doing this, leading someone out the back door because they refused to vax. The other patients, especially if they are there to be treated for anything or in a weakened state, or if they are immunocompromised, do not deserve to be in a small room presence with someone out there raw-dogging their ignorance. Protecting the many from the dirt-stupid few is the Hippocratic Oath in action. Next.
This next person writes, I didn't vaccinate my 4 boys after my son had a reaction at his 6-month shots. This was way back in 2005. Had doctors tell me that I was going to kill my baby by not getting the shots. I was treated so poorly as a young mother. I'm now 40. My boys are 20, 17, 13, and 11, and we haven't vaccinated since. They are declined by all pediatricians in our area due to not vaccinating. I've called dozens, and no one will see us. We are near Atlanta, so we just never go to a doctor's office, and if we have to, we just go to urgent care or to the chiropractor. There is no way anyone will ever convince me those shots are good for anyone, let alone babies. And yes, the older your children get, the older that they are, and just being able to see how healthy they are, it becomes undeniable. You can't convince me that these shots are saving lives. What these shots are doing are minting billionaires. And actually, people are trading health. These shots, as we have seen in these multiple examples, are making children sick. There is no question. They tell you that on the vaccine inserts. They just convince you that the risk is worth it. And I would argue that the risk is not worth it, especially for the mothers who are convinced their children got autism after these shots, and that is what these next set of comments are pertaining to.
No. Again, no. So this person claimed that because the first kid had a bad reaction and doesn't say anything further on what it could have been, she doomed the rest of the kids. I call bullshit. This is another one that sounds like they were jumping on just to say something, anything, to be part of the conversation. I have never met a parent that didn't know the name of conditions or allergic reactions their kid had to anything, that didn't describe it in absolute detail. Mm-hmm. Candace going on with her whole spiel again is just gross. Next.
Anna writes, my kid is the 1 in 36. I definitely noticed a change in him after his 18-month vaccines. I wish I knew then what I know now. I gave birth in November to baby number 2, and I am proud to say that we aren't doing the pokes this time around. As I always reinforce in every episode, Diana, don't beat yourself up over it. If I didn't have my shot in the dark and didn't actually suffer from a reaction when I was 19, 20, whenever it was, and I got the Gardasil shot, I wouldn't have known, and I probably would have made the same decisions as you. It is impossible for us to know when you have the media in lockstep with Big Pharma, with doctors and physicians telling us that what we are doing is making our children healthy. Why would we question the system? It takes a lot to be able to believe even that there could be a much more nefarious, evil incentive that is happening, to believe that perhaps Big Pharma is not out to help us get better, but wants to keep us sick. So again, don't blame yourself, because you would have almost had to be crazy to think that way naturally, almost, honestly.
Did y'all catch that shit? Again, proving my point. She doesn't know when she was allegedly vaccinated?
Mm-hmm.
I say again, it didn't happen. Not only, as we covered in the first episode of this series, not only is there no VAERS data supporting this claim, she doesn't have it nailed down in her own mind when a major life event happened to her. Bullshit. And that person saying, my kid was one of the 1 in 36. Like, lady, firstborn kids are over-repped on the autism spectrum for unknown reasons, but it has fuck all to do with vaccines. If I have one thing to say regarding this case that could be positive, well, I'm glad that kid is vaxxed, even if he has an idiot for a parent.
Mm-hmm.
The next clip is the last clip.
Lastly, this comment from A.M. Fredericks. She writes, oh, it's because we weren't diagnosing it back in 2000. Now our diagnostic skills are so much better so they can recognize the signs. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic, but that's always a rebuttal when you throw out solid numbers. Yes, they cannot ignore the facts when they are looking at the trends of autism. They are actually trying to say, oh no, we just got better at diagnosing it. Really? Go talk to your grandparents. Ask them how many kids couldn't speak, right? That they just couldn't speak or communicate. They will tell you, we did not have this when I was growing up. This is obviously extraordinary, and yet we are now at the part of the Big Pharma programming where they are gaslighting people and going, oh no, this was always the case. 1 in 36 children couldn't speak. That was always a thing here. You just didn't notice it. We just got so good at diagnosing it that we've gone from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 36 in a very short period of time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. As always, we link the resources that we use and we post them on our show Instagram page. The handle is at ShotInTheDarkDW. It is a great follow. I think we can get that page up to 1 million follows this year. I think that's going to be my goal. Got to have a good goal in 2024. I want moms following at ShotInTheDarkDW. So don't just follow it. Get one of your mom friends to follow it as well. Thank you guys so much for joining me. See you next time.
Free at last. So, what?
The comment of, ask your grandparents how many people they knew that couldn't talk. I know I've watched a lot of AMC movie theater.
Right.
Because it was on the TV all the time.
Yeah.
But most of the movies would have some guy in it that they'd go, oh yeah, don't mind him. He doesn't talk all that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a common enough thing. It just wasn't stated as an autism thing. It was just,
right.
Oh yeah, him, don't talk.
Yeah.
Don't bother talking to him. It'll be wasted on him.
Yeah. So, you guys want some fucking ammo for that shit? It's been said before, but I'll try to make it shorter. Yes, we got better with diagnosing autism for several reasons. 1, it was thought to be so rare and so specific that it required, let me make sure my thing is on 3. It required training that most doctors and professionals didn't have. 2, the label was applied only to what would now be seen as extreme spectrum cases, not the quirky kid in school. 3, when children were identified with it in the extremes or in cases that were close enough, they were usually taken away to special schools. 4, it was thought for decades to be a male-only condition, and girls with it were labeled hysterical or any number of medical pejoratives, but they were labeled as autistic. Or they were not labeled as autistic, rather. 5. Because of social stigma and the threat of being sent away, or having parents that chose to beat them rather than understand them, many autistic people in past generations learned how to mask who they were to get by in life. As the knowledge base grew and we as a society got more into celebrating not just our differences but also celebrating nerds, autism became more acceptable. People have been opening up about being on the spectrum for a while now. So fuck Candace Amber Owens farmer, college dropout, bigot, fascist. Funny thing about the last clip, the bit where she wanted the show to get over 1 million followers, that desire at the time would prove short-lived. She was fired about 2 months after this episode aired on Daily Wire Plus.
Oh, good.
So now let's drink something dumb to take the edge off. What do we got tonight?
Peanut butter chocolate porter made by Shells. Or
SCH Shells.
Shells, yes.
And they are, since 1860, brewed to endure, a storied legacy of fine beers.
They are made here in Minnesota. New Ulm.
New Ulm. Yeah. Also, the home of several different good drinks, including that orange soda we liked a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's give these an open. All right. And now the pour.
Well, definitely fucking smells like peanut butter and chocolate. Goddamn.
Yeah. All right, gotta let it
Let it breathe a little.
yeah. Ah. Oh, it has a good head on the beer, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Goodness. Yeah, it definitely smells like it should. Ooh, peanut butter is strong. That is a powerful aroma.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This was part of the, hey, what's a weird beer I could drink with my dad selection that I ended up having to make on my own while having a guy awkwardly stand there trying to recommend me beers that clearly had no real nuance beyond fucking some buds.
Yeah. Or they're from, like, oh yeah, like that would be weird enough. It's from Italy. It's like, dude, it's Peroni.
Yeah.
It's clearly just a normal ass beer. That said, I mean, Peroni is delicious, but...
Yeah. Or saying, oh yeah, no, I do like a darker beer, you know, like stouts and stuff, and going, oh, well then you'd probably like Guinness. No shit, Sherlock.
Right. How do you think I got here? Yeah.
How do you think I arrived at this?
While we wait for the head to die down on these, I included the long ass bit about the many problems with having pneumonia, because I felt like, as someone who had looked into it myself, I didn't fully understand what how bad it could be.
Yeah.
Until I was reading through that and I was like, oh, this is fuck shit terrible bad.
Yeah.
I don't ever want this in my life bad.
From the sounds of it, I got lucky.
You got very lucky. You got very, very lucky.
Not that I felt like it when I had the pneumonia, but I apparently got lucky because I could have been way worse.
Yeah, it could have been much, much more worse.
I only had to deal with the lung thing happening to me.
Yeah.
I didn't have to deal with all the rest of that shit. I'm very glad I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I already got funky enough hearing as is.
I just took my first trial run at this one. It is strong in the peanut butter flavor. Like, they really went for the burnt edge peanut butter flavor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting the chocolate so much. Like, the chocolate's up there on the surface of my taste buds, but I'm not really tasting the chocolate.
It's kind of... It tastes like a 70%. I think that's where that burnt edge is coming from.
Well, the burnt edge really. If you ever see the Food That Built America, they do a Reese's episode.
Okay.
And Reese's peanut butter, he was looking for a peanut butter flavor that nobody else had. And they showed it, in dramatized form on the show, but one of his cooks came out to him and he's like, hey, we burnt this batch, but, they wanted you to try it anyway. You want to try every batch. And so he tries it and he's like, oh my God, that's it. That's the flavor. Recreate that. And it's one of those things where, like, after hearing that, and then, you try a Reese's product again, you're like, okay, that's what it is. That's why nobody could ever get this right.
Yeah. Why it is its own distinct flavor.
I mean, that's that. The chocolate flavor on this does help it go down.
Yeah.
But they really went for, like, the burnt peanut taste.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's not terrible. I'm going to finish this class, but yeah, it's
This is basically my nightcap because I got a 7 a.m. in the morning.
right.
So.
Well, if you got a 7 a.m. in the morning, I've got a 7 a.m. in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah, but well, anything to add to this before I press that stop button there?
Highly recommend nobody get pneumonia.
Yeah, get vaxxed. Get vaxxed. That is the constant refrain of this show. Get fucking vaccinated. Get your kids vaccinated.
Yeah, because you definitely don't want to deal with the muscle loss end of it either.
Yeah.
I was finally starting to shape up some decent musculature. I was going to the gym on a regular. And then got pneumonia. I was down for a week with what I thought was just a real bad flu. Weren't a real bad flu.
Nope.
Could not eat even a sliver of a hot dog without puking up liquid.
That, and do not get prescription for GLP-1s without talking to your doctor. Do not use an online prescription house. Please, for the love of God, don't do that shit.
Yeah, don't do that to yourself.
We went through it, and like I said, I included the Ozempic paperwork in the link stack. It's one of the top things. Please, please, please read that. Heed the warnings. Please don't fuck around with that shit unless you are being medically guided, because obviously it works differently for different people, and some people get really fucked up on it. And
whatever you do, don't do purging either.
Yeah, just like
that's the worst opposite thing.
Yeah, like no bulimia in the house, please.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, that's it. This has been a long episode. That was a can on the floor. Almost 4 hours.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're about 4 minutes from 4 hours.
I thought it was going to run long, and I was right.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's it, everybody. Have a great day, night, whatever it is for you. And, yeah, we'll be back again soon with episode 20. I don't know the content of episode 20. I haven't cracked it open yet, but God help me, I'm going to have to at some point.
Oh, yeah.
All right, everybody. That's it. Bye.
Bye.